and a 5-minute Q&A. And these are topics I have not got time to cover. There's way more. This is about, we need another 3 sessions if I was to go through all these details. So there's a lot I cannot cover. So don't give me a hard time if I can't get to all these details, right? And that's my website, The Practical Utopian, where you can find all of my work. But first, before jumping in, we have to start off by understanding our ocean of trouble. Starting with the climate emergency. Last time the world was 3 degrees warmer, which is where we're heading, the sea level was 25 meters higher. And that's a 5-meter sea level rise in Vancouver, to give you context. And there's so many other troubles coming because of the climate crisis. I've written 2 major papers just this year, one for the federal government in Canada and one for the British Columbia government, which are both on my website if you want them. We're also dealing with a biodiversity emergency. In 2019, since 1970, we've wiped out 60% of the world's mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles in a massive annihilation of wildlife. We got a crisis of kleptocratic corruption, really spelled out well in this brand new book in Corruption in America, how elites are controlling everything from taxation to government regulations and entire federal departments. We have a crisis of dramatic inequality. In 2019, 82% of the wealth generated globally went to the richest 1%. And by July 2020, Amazon's Jeff Bezos had accumulated a net worth of $172 billion. We have plutocratic tax havens. In Britain, more than 1/3 of the country's billionaires, 6,000 people, have transferred their wealth to a place called Moneyland to avoid paying taxes. In 2018, following the Trump tax reform, billionaires paid less tax than steelworkers, school teachers, and retirees. We have a problem of selfish finance, whereas every year $360 trillion of regular wealth is being managed by banks, hedge funds, pension funds, and the like, all chasing the highest return, regardless of the climate, ecological, and human rights impacts. A problem of rising private debt, with record levels in Switzerland, America, Switzerland, Australia, Norway, Canada, South Korea, which are putting a burden on people's personal lives and on the overall economy, with more money being spent in interest and going back to the moneylenders. If the interest is 5% that you're paying, an economy has to grow at 5% a year to pay for it. Similar problem with rising corporate debt, now being covered by central banks buying up shares on the stock market using central bank money. In 2019, the IMF warned that if there was a global recession, only half as bad as 19 trillion of high-risk corporate debt could be at risk, mostly in America and China. We have slowing economic growth. The rate of growth that we knew during the 60s, and we go back to that, when it was average, 5 to 10%, is now being slowing and is heading towards 0% growth by 2030, which to some people is a crisis, to others is a huge opportunity for change, and we'll come to that. Problem of war and conflict. We spend 100 times more money waging war than we do on waging peace, an average of $135 a month for every person on the planet. It's part of our $14 trillion global defense budget. Collapsing communities, places where shops have closed, factories have closed, people are losing heart, and conversations are about crime, drugs, and family crises, rather than sports, arts, and new communities. Affordable housing crisis, which we know all too well about. In Los Angeles County, to take one example, 59,000 people have no home of any kind. 16,000 people live in cars and 11,000 in tents and makeshift shelters. A crisis of work, with wages being stagnant for 40 years. In America, when the official unemployment rate was 3.9%, when you include those not in school, not retired, and not working, and 2 million who are in prison, the actual rate is 12.7%, or 20 million people. And then with automation coming on, where are people going to find work? A crisis of increasing loneliness. So in Britain, half of people surveyed in 2011 said they wouldn't normally ask their neighbor for any kind of help. 70% didn't know their neighbors' names. Only 6% said there was a strong sense of community. In 2018, 40% of Americans said they felt lonely, a proportion that's doubled since the 1980s. We have a failure of development. In 1966, people in the world's poorest countries were 33 times poorer than those in the richest. By 2016, they were 134 times poorer. In consequence, we've got increased migration as people flee droughts, violence, drug wars, civil war, and economic collapse. We've got a collapse of trust. In 2018, Americans reported a 37% drop in the trust index compared to a 27-point gain in China. Across all institutions, they're just not trusting them. As a result of that, we got nationalism and populism, with white populists spreading fear, blaming liberals, immigrants, Muslims, and Jews for their troubles. Problem of opioids and mental illness. We've got the plutocratic corruption of democracy by big billionaires. We've got continuing racial oppression. And overall, we got a sense of a loss of civilizational purpose. And where are we going as a civilization? The big belief of the Enlightenment is sort of worn out to a tatter. On top of that, we got COVID-19. So there's a lot brewing here, and it's fairly alarming. So with that, let's go, oh yeah, and some say, well, it's all a conspiracy. They go for the easy option of not thinking about it and just blame some anonymous big force that's controlling everything. So with that, let's go to our first breakout group. And the question is, what are the fundamental causes? What do you think are the fundamental causes of our ocean of trouble? Can someone volunteer to be your group facilitator for a quick round of introductions to ensure that everyone has a chance to share their ideas? And if you want to speak, just raise your hand. And then we'll go to 5 minutes of Q&A. Press the button. Bob.
All right, let's see.
How's it working?
It is.
I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, just break out rooms. We're going to go for 10 rooms.
Okay, that's just 4 people each at the moment. That's good.
Hopefully that does it. Okay. So we have 10 rooms with 4 people each. Okay, Guy, can you hear me? Peter, can you hear me? There we go. We're all coming back now.
Okay, so the way we will be doing the question and answer, because there doesn't seem to be a hand raise button of the familiar kind here, is that you people, if you could please type your questions in the chat. Go down to the bottom, or can we just speak up? I wonder if that would work. Now, we're not that many people right now. We're two screens.
So for
I'm
instance,
not
Lorna,
sure.
Lorna Wagand has raised her hand there.
Yeah.
You could, Lorna, if you unmute yourself, you can ask a question.
There's the hand. Okay, Lorna, I'm going to try to keep track. There's the hand raise. Good for you. Lorna, please go. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
The hand raise is
So
available.
my question kind of comes out of where we were going at our breakout group. And that is, I guess I have to reword what I'm thinking, but how do you feel in terms of whether we can pinpoint inequity as one of the biggest drivers of the problems that we're in?
That came up in our group as well. And I challenged someone to say, well, what's the cause of inequality and inequity? We're talking fundamental causes here. What's causing that inequality? I don't think it's fundamental. I think it's a sub-cause.
Well, I guess greed is a part of it. I mean, when we think about people who would not consider whether they're eating stuff made with palm oil, it's a lack of education, I guess, as well.
Okay.
But it seems to me it's people who are making money from destroying rainforests.
Yeah.
I think that's a fundamental thing, and you can sort of follow the money throughout and find that it's often the problem.
Anyone else want to chime in on that theme?
I don't, if
Stan.
you could raise your hand, Stan, unmute yourself.
And Deb Jack.
We'll do with hands, but also try and see if you can raise your hand on the sidebar.
All
Yeah,
right.
Deb Jack has done that.
It's not working. What was I trying to say? I was thinking about if you read history and you read about civilizations like the Roman Empire and the all of it, you're impressed with the tremendous destruction and waste that went on throughout our whole civilization. So what I'm leading up to here is I'm asking the question: what we see today, as bad as we think it is that fundamentally any different to what humanity has been through for the last umpteen thousand years? It's just that we do it with flashy things and glossier things and on a much bigger scale. So to me, it points to some fundamental quirk in humanity that we're
You're
dealing.
getting warm in terms of my conclusions.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes and 2 more questions. How about we hear from Deb Jack and Peter Jones with their questions, and then Guy, you'll manage the time to move us on. So Deb, if you could unmute yourself and make a brief question, we'll get Peter's as well.
It's not so much a question, but as I said when we had a smaller group, I honestly believe it's the aspect of opportunism that is inherent in human beings, that when they see an advantage, they take it. And I think dealing with others and all the rest of it is almost an exercise of will and decision, but the natural thing is to take advantage of whatever for your own personal best interests and those of your own, i.e. family or close number of people you're around.
So I'm going to get to the genetic origins of that.
All right, Peter, quick question, and then we'll be in a good position to move on.
A little context from my perspective. It's 50 years after the Club of Rome's predicament of mankind, and Hassan Özbekhan identified 49 continuous critical problems of civilization. And so to actually even address Stan's with this question, I would pose the question regarding that. His thesis was that all these mega problems were becoming so interconnected that they would not be you could not tease out any root cause or fundamental because they were all going to continue to be interconnected from that point forward, and they have, I've observed. My question would be, to what extent are we dealing with systems of effects in our attempt to identify fundamentals? And that can be a trap. So things like equity, definitely an outcome effect of many, many other causes that have led to that as a problem, you know, and the inequality in money, climate change is an effects system. You know, we can't deal with these directly. So I'd ask the question, can we tease apart effects from significant underlying drivers?
Yeah, and we got Laura on the chat box saying civilizations have lived and failed when they forgot their place as part of nature. And what is new and frightening today is that we've zoomed past planetary limits with advances that have moved more quickly than our ability to think through the possible consequences. So let's dive back into the presentation. And because I'm addressing this stuff right on. So I believe that the first of the four fundamental causes, the first fundamental cause is the ancient impulse to dominate. We go back 6 million years, we share 98% of our genes with the common ancestor we have with chimps and bonobos. Someone needs to mute themselves, I think. We have the same maternal impulses, the same playful impulses, the same caring impulses, the same aggressive impulse to dominate, the same hierarchical impulses, which a smile says I'm friendly, I'm not threatening. The same cooperative and altruistic impulses, in which we are caring for non-kin with no personal genetic advantage, but we get a group selection advantage. David Sloan Wilson, leading biologist, says that selfishness beats altruism within a group, but altruistic groups beat selfish groups. Everything else is commentary. So an altruistic group will pass on more genes and be more successful. We have the same murderous impulse. Non-alpha males resent domination and will sometimes kill their leader. So when our ancestors invented bows and arrows and spears, working together as a team became all important, and the alpha males lost their physical advantage. Then you can picture some sub-alphas looking around, I'll go back to that one, and saying, you know, who wants to be the next alpha male? I can't defeat you with my fists and teeth anymore. And you suddenly discover that working cooperatively is much more effective. So all across the world, hunter-gatherers are egalitarian and cooperative. They go out of their way to suppress upstarts and self-importance, and they lived by this code for 300,000 years. They knew that self-importance was a danger. They used teasing and joking, and if need be, ostracism, if need be, exile, and if need be, execution, if you've got a serial rapist going on. But they knew it was a problem, stemming back, they didn't know that, stemming back to our genetic origins as primates. So to dominate or cooperate, that is a very fundamental question. Our primate ancestors had 6 million years of life in hierarchical dominating cultures with tough alpha males. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors had 300,000 years of egalitarian cooperative cultures. So what happened? To sustain egalitarian cooperation, they developed cultural methods to suppress self-importance, being a jerk, and attempted acts of domination and greed. With the coming of agriculture and food surpluses, egalitarian societies gave way to achievement societies. You can now harvest enough grain that there's more than you need for the tribe as a whole. You can hide some under the floor of your house and say, well, don't need to share all this. And so some families can begin to get wealthier than others. But there was no inheritance, so the code of ethics of cooperation was continued for a good 5,000 years. Over time, however, the successful achievers obtained inheritances for their children, enabling the return of domination, and inequality arises in a really big way. The return of domination brought war, conquest, slavery, colonies, empire, and frankly, yet more war, conquest, slavery, colonies, and empire. Centuries of it, millennia of it. All of our known history, as we're taught in schools, comes from this era, because none of us are taught about hunter-gatherer cultures. We get domination by the wealthy and powerful through private property, private land ownership, private banks, private debts, debt slavery. And we get similarly domination by communist states with state-owned and controlled property, land, businesses, banks, debts, and I should say gulags. It's all domination. To sustain their domination, rulers learned that they had to suppress cooperative revolts, protests, and uprisings. Until democracy, every single protest was crushed. normally followed by execution and slaughter, whether it's a slave revolt or a peasant revolt or a workers' revolt. For 5,000 years, domination has suppressed cooperation, and it has shaped the way we think about everything, because all the culture has developed under this culture of domination. It has sort of colonized our brains and our minds and our thinking. So in the big picture, if you look at 14 billion years of evolution, the game has always been a parallel game of competition and cooperation hand in hand. They've both been parallel things happening at the same time. Today, if you have too much competition, you end up with dominators. So the choice is to dominate or cooperate. And there's a chunk here I just got to dwell on because I didn't have slides on this, but when the psychology of power is such that when you get power, for a minority of people, but not all, it goes to the head. And people who have power begin eating with their mouths open, having more affairs, not paying taxes, generally being egregiously badly behaved because self-importance makes them believe they can get away with it. But it's not everyone that it happens to. So we have a choice. It's a crucial personal choice in how we behave. It's also a political and economic choice. It is a culture based on domination or on cooperation. And so that's the first big origin of our problems, in my understanding. The second of the four is faulty economic ideas. Ever since the French National Assembly, we've divided into left and right, coming from the Jacobins and the constitutional monarchists, the Girondins in the middle. So on the left, we got socialism based on Marxist dialectical materialism, class struggle, and faith in a workers' revolution, based on some Hegelian belief that there's inevitability to the laws of history that will guarantee workers' utopia. On the right, you've got capitalists based on the primacy of rational self-interest, following the so-called laws of neoclassical economics, which I'll come to. Both of these theories are wrong. Both deny us free human agency. We're not subject to any supposed laws of Marxist dialectical materialism or of modern neoclassical economics. We have consciousness, which gives us agency. When we couple our agency with intelligence, creativity, hard work, imagination, research, teamwork, cooperation, and love, we can do amazing things. Of course we need good business, and of course we need good governance. This whole left v right thing duality is a tragic mistake. And it's so tragic that it caused a torrent of grief. From the Russian Revolution, the gulags, fascism, which developed out of a fear of a communist revolution, the whole World War II, the civil wars in Vietnam, Korea, the whole Cold War, all based on the fact that the right-wingers were behaving in a way that caused workers grief, and the revolutionary thinking threatened the right-wingers so much they revolted to fascism and Nazism, all based on false thinking and false ideas. Capitalism is not an economic system. It is a cultural system of selfish values expressed in the economy through the use of capital. These values become locked into systems of property ownership and law, but fundamentally it's not the system that's the problem, it's the values. So in neoclassical economics, developed at the turn of the 20th century, 1890s, selfishness becomes enshrined as an economic law. The free market will supposedly bring progress to all, the role of government's minimized, nature's ignored, climate emergence is ignored, realities of power and ownership are ignored, realities of money, banking, and debt are ignored. And neoclassical economics blesses all this with quasi-religious mathematical zeal. Money becomes everything as a measure of success, and you can cut the planet up and carve it up and chew it up everywhere, any which way you want if you're maximizing shareholder value. So yes, Sammy, he says in the cave, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, our father's corporations created a lot of value for their shareholders. So the economics of kindness is a cultural system of compassionate values expressed in the economy through the use not of capital, but of democracy. In capitalist cultures and economies, winning and economic aggression leave little room for kindness. In a cooperative cultures and economies, there's much more room for kindness and helping each other. The third fundamental cause is simple ecological ignorance, lending itself to abuse. So GDP really should stand for gross depletion of the planet, because that's what we're doing with it. Don't you go worrying yourself, it's just another externality, the climate crisis, ignorance about climate crisis. So ignorance about the carbon cycle. We have cabinet ministers who don't know what the carbon cycle is. Ignorance about our gut microbiomes, about where our waste goes, about the role of keystone species, about the ecological origin of pandemics. Why do I need to know that? Yeah, maybe we do need to learn this stuff, but we're so ignorant that it's just a fact of life. We're not born with any ecological knowledge. We have to learn it. So what are you proposing? Fundamentally, we need to replace a cultural system which ego dominates to one in which and here's a result. This is artwork by Robin Woods showing the impact of ego dominating on nature. Just phenomenally powerful artwork that just gets to the heart of what's happening here. The numbers coming out of South America, the numbers of wildlife burnt to death in the forest fires is just awful, right? To a world in which we are back in harmony with eco. We're one player amidst the beauty of nature. So consequences, solution one could be done very quickly, that every university must require a student to pass Ecology 101 as a condition of entry. And every new person applying to teach at a university as well. And number two is a lot more complex, that every business needs to operate within nature's resilience boundaries through regulation fundamentally. And look, we're coming to an economy in harmony with nature. That's what's possible for us. So getting on to the cause number four, that's fundamental. I think it's our loss of civilizational purpose, because purpose expresses agency. When we know where we're going and we got real purpose, we can achieve miracles. If we lose that, we drift. So who are we? Where are we going on this planet with all this mess we're creating? It's seriously a problem. We need to know. We're at a time of critical crisis. This decade is the most critical decade in the whole history of humanity. We've tried animism. We've been through animism to explain the world, through monotheism, through polytheism, humanism and rationalism, which sound great until you realize what we're doing with our, our science and technology. Socialism, which really inspired people, through till people discovered what went on in the gulags. National socialism was very inspiring to a whole whack of Germans and a whole whack of crazy people in America right now. Democratic socialism became a belief system, but it really isn't a sort of fundamental, deep belief system, but it's a pretty solid. And then we have materialism, which has taken over democratic socialism. The greed is all. And then narcissism with its leader south of the border. And for more people, just grief and despairism out of confusion. So what is our new story? 5-minute break for discussion.
All right. Hello, Lillian, Penny? Penny, can you hear me?
I can.
Somehow we got stuck in a breakout room of only two.
Oh, is that happening?
I don't know why that is, but whoops,
Oh,
now we have
here's
William. William, can you
Uh-huh.
unmute yourself? I can unmute you. Let's see, there we go. William? For some reason, you're still muted.
There we are. I'm unmuted. I'm sorry, unmuted.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have 4 minutes to discuss all of that.
Holy cow.
Maybe we should just start. I'm Bob Worcester. I'm technically hosting this meeting on behalf of the Suzuki Elders. But I'd be interested to know how you got in touch with this event today.
Well, I heard about it from Erlene.
Oh, good. Well, that's a good source. Penny?
I heard Guy Dauncy speaking at a Unitarian get-together in Vancouver maybe 5 years ago, maybe longer. And I've been on his email list since.
Oh, great. Well, welcome.
Thank you. And I am totally stumped by the question, where are we going? I've been so problem oriented. How can we make life better for teachers and healthcare workers. There's something terribly wrong going on. How can we address all these things? And I forgot about going somewhere. So that's a useful question.
Hi, Ray. Can you unmute yourself? Well, I'm interested in this topic. I've been doing some research on the lobster fishery in Nova Scotia as an example of how conflicts, environmental conflicts, get out of hand.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of following the guide that Jim Hogan wrote in his book, I'm Right and You're an Idiot, which is how do you depolarize discussions? I think we're going to have to wait until after the election in the States before we begin any depolarizing process.
Speaking of right and idiot, no.
Yes. Yes. Well, I still think that Trump is a symptom and not a cause.
Yes.
I keep thinking that there are, what, 40 million Americans that follow him. So whatever you may think about him, there's 40 million Americans that think he's the best thing since sliced bread, which I find much scarier than him. But
Yes.
I'm from south of your border, and I'm very scared by it. And I think you're absolutely certain it's been a long time coming. He's an outcome as well as a cause.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Jim Hogan's thesis is that we are by nature a very tribal species, and we're very sensitive to who is with us and who is against us. And we'll accept almost anything from the people who are with us, but we will react dramatically to what we think people who challenge or threaten that.
Could I drop an observation into that? It's probably, sure. I'm dealing a lot these days with youth, and children and climate change. So I'm plugged into a lot of groups.
Yep.
Young people are getting out of it. The leaders are the kinds of people that I come in contact with. I think we oldsters are struggling with that more. I'm seeing a lot of signs from lots of young people. They're thinking in a different direction.
Yep, I hope so.
I do too. I hope that's right. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah. Ray, where are you located?
I'm in Toronto.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And I belong to an organization called Climate Fast. It's a local Toronto organization. I've been supporting our local Fridays for Future Toronto group.
Okay.
But they've been actively supporting Indigenous rights.
Oh yeah.
So just need to have up with that right now.
I think that according to our timing, we're supposed to be going back into the general meeting again, and I'm responsible for doing that. So I'm going to have to back out here.
You should do your job.
Okay.
Thank you.
We should have 30 seconds to close out. Ray, I'd be interested in your perspective on the lobster conflict in Nova Scotia. That's one that I'm following here in British Columbia because we had similar situations, but we'll have to talk about that at another time because I think our 30 seconds is just 9, 8, 7. Where are you, William?
I'm in California near Sacramento.
Oh, great. Okay, we're opening all rooms back. Guy, are you here?
No.
I'm looking through for a guy to come back online here.
Maybe he's still in the breakout room.
5 minutes is a bit too short.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Well, let's see.
We had to cut off our last person, and I think she had started to have some good stuff. Amber, that was you.
Indeed.
And Well, hopefully there'll be time to we'll go back in. Maybe the next time we go back in, we'll go in for 10 minutes or so. Were people in the same group that they were initially?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. Now, where is Guy?
Yeah, where is that guy?
Oh, bad pun. Oh, really
Bad
well done.
You can send a broadcast message.
Huh?
Now, I assume he was speaking from his home in Vancouver or BC.
He's at Yellow Point Lodge on Vancouver Island.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Now, I don't see.
It's quite windy up here. I'm just up in Comox Valley.
Oh, it's all right here, right?
Possible
I'm
that
unable
clouds-
to. It's all right.
Now,
It's all right.
Where is Guy?
Do you have his phone? You could text him, and he might not be able to do his slides from his phone, but I use my phone when I'm in a pinch.
All right.
Get back on Zoom.
I can see. Okay, I'm getting here. There. I think in 10 seconds, everyone else will, for some reason, not every room closed when I tried to close it. Okay, Guy, are you here now? Guy. There we go.
Want to be able to see the chat so that we can call on people for Q&A. Guy, you're going to want to shift the screen there, I think.
Oh, there you are. Guy, can you?
We have a 10-minute stretch break scheduled for 2 o'clock.
For 2, but we have Q&A.
The Q&A,
now
I'm getting all
until
mixed
then.
up. I'm getting all mixed up.
It's the Q&A now.
Yeah,
and
there
we
we go.
need to
Sorry
have,
about
we need to be able to see the participants, which we now can.
Sorry.
And then people, please raise your hands or speak up. I don't see any hands quite yet, but that it is possible, or write in the chat room, or just speak out. If you raise your hand on that sidebar, we'll know that you have a question. Bob, go.
Yes, just one technical question. Did
And
everyone
Cynthia.
end up back in their original group with that breakout session?
We did
Yep.
in ours, yes.
Yes.
And for some reason, when I ended the sessions with the 30-second timeout, it didn't appear to me as though all of the breakout rooms ended at that point.
Well.
So
There was a little teeny glitch, but mostly it worked really well.
So there's some
Cynthia?
very
Yeah.
fundamental. Yeah. Okay.
Cynthia had a question, and I thought, hand up.
I was just trying to think to answer the question, what's our new story? It's such a big question, of course, but I imagine there cannot be one new story. It must be so multiple stories, because I mean the population, the world is so complex, such variety of cultural and racial, and then belief systems. So each group of them perhaps will have to, will be, maybe are now looking for their own new story to move on to. So that's how I feel.
Yeah. Interesting, Cynthia. When in our hunter-gatherer period, when there were tribes scattered all over the planet from Australia to the Arctic, who had almost no contact with each other, when you look at their belief systems, in the detail level, they all believed in different this and that. But at a deeper level, they all believed in some harmony with nature, the role of the ancestors, the need to sort of be a partner with nature and not dominate nature. They did that unwittingly because that came natural to them. And I believe that we share our common humanity, you know, in the stuff we share is so much more important and bigger than the differences we have around our little belief systems. And I think something deeper is brewing. You know, everyone, in countries like China and India, there's still excitement about getting development and getting prosperity. But even there, the number of environmental groups who are protesting the pollution, who know we have to do more. And China itself is talking about a new ecological civilization, which is my belief of what our new story needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah, so the big picture, we shift from ego to eco at the top, and then there are manifold ways that can unfold with there's a
Anyone else
possibility.
got
Other hands, yes,
any,
another question?
Yeah, or thoughts?
Thoughts, comments?
I can't make the hand work.
Okay, Lorna has a hand, and then who can't make the hand work?
Looked like Deb.
Deb.
Deb. Okay, Lorna, then Deb.
The hand part is in the participants, under participants.
That's what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You go in there and it says, raise hand.
Yes.
Blue hand.
Yep, lower hand.
It doesn't do it on mine. It's some people's.
It
It
doesn't
does,
do it
some
on
doesn't.
mine, yeah.
So-
So Lorna and then Deb. There,
So,
there it is. They're both up. Okay, Lorna.
I've often thought that we need to spend more time thinking about the word enough. And over the years, you know, that feeling of enough has sort of been lost. You know, we used to think about business, and there was a phrase that said the people should find a need and fill it if they wanted to be good at business. And then that switched to create a need and fill it somewhere along the line. And I think somehow or another we have to, and again, the old phrase, we have to examine our lives, and we have to think about what's enough for me and what's enough for everybody else. And I think meditating on the word enough would help us to get a, you know, a feeling of, you know, it's like they say you shouldn't eat till you're full. You should just eat till you feel a certain sense of satisfaction or whatever.
I think everyone's going to agree. Oh, mani padme enough. Oh, mani padme enough.
And Deb. And then I'm also going to invite people who haven't yet spoken. We really would be pleased to hear from more of you. So Deb.
I just want to say that, first of all, I'm not altogether sure how we can be so clear on what the hunter-gatherers were doing, because they didn't leave a huge amount in terms of records, as I understand. But what I wanted to say was, we now understand very clearly that when a human being experiences crises of any kind, that begins to change the brain. So I do not think, after all of this time that human beings have been on the planet, that we are going to be able to go back. That we've got brains that are in many, many ways changed from what they used to be. Not to say we're any better, any worse, any more or less intelligence than the Neanderthals, for example. But we know that trauma changes the brain, and that changes how people function.
Well, that's certainly true. I mean, trauma is generally an individual thing, and occasionally when you get to sort of genocide, it becomes a cultural thing, and an entire culture absorbs that trauma and becomes extremely defensive or reacts in particular ways. Like the evidence from hunter-gatherers is derived from two sources, like the current existing groups of hunter-gatherer who've not been influenced by modern civilization, where anthropologists have been in there looking really closely at how they behave, and at bones and deaths and scatterings, which gives evidence of executions. You can tell when someone has been executed as opposed to die naturally. And so there's evidence, a huge database of 150 different tribes and clans that show how this kind of behavior, among anthropologists, is an enormous agreement that hunter-gatherer tribes were egalitarian and cooperative.
I'm such an anthropologist, and I agree. I've worked with First Nations, and you said, well, that how everyone worked in concert with keeping the environment healthy. And my grandfather was an environmentalist, not indigenous, and he felt that this is something that we really have to reintroduce to our contemporary society. And I totally agree, because this concept of competition and taking over things is not useful, and it depletes the ecology, and so we need to rethink how we operate.
Yep, that's what I'm up to. Bob.
Yes, I'm sort of interested in Jim Hogan's idea about I'm right and you're an idiot. And his main thesis seems to be that we're very happy to be cooperative with the people in our tribal groups, but we're deadly to anyone outside of our tribal groups. And we seem to be very sensitive to who's with us and who's against us. And given the state of polarization south of the border and the potential for polarization within our borders, I'm wondering what the anthropologists say about tribalism.
Say about what?
Tribalism, being tribal mentalities. You're with us or against us. I'll do anything for the people in my group, but I'll oppose to the death anyone from the other group.
Yeah,
we're all tribal.
Tribal people worked very hard to keep positive relations with all the groups that were on any border, on any side of them. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we need to reintroduce into contemporary society as well. And that was an important aspect of their worldview and the way they lived.
If Canada and America were in a sort of a medieval era and Trump was going to rule forever, Justin Trudeau will be marrying his daughters off to Trump's daughters, Trump's sons, in order to sort of cement and prevent tribalism.
I really do wish you hadn't brought up the fact of using women as objects for those purposes.
Well, it's a fact from the past. That's how they did it. That patriarchy did that. Because, you know, that's a fact.
They did.
Yeah. I said if we were in medieval times, I wasn't.
not a current solution.
I find that. I mean, we know from sports that tribalism is not just instinctive but extreme fun. Yes. Watching sports is a whole lot more fun if you identify with a team. It's boring if you don't. But conversely, in Canada, in the number of people I know out of the 35 million is about, maybe a couple of thousand. And yet I am able to get on cooperative with almost everyone else. So we have a phenomenally high level of cooperative, non-tribal behavior in our country, which is less so south of the border. But even I believe at the local level, in most of America, people are still cooperating and helping, helping each other as neighbors. In some areas, it's gone too far and they're now not. But I think that the fear in America is coming from confusion about why people feel the impact of inequality. They've been left, they feel that being left behind, they're not getting ahead, they feel confused by it all. And a quick blame from populism is easier than understanding the reality of domination versus cooperation.
Yeah. Yeah, and interestingly, I think it's true that cooperation crosses political boundaries. It's not just one sort of political view where people take care of themselves, are generous, help people along the road. Okay, we have just a couple more minutes. Any people we haven't heard from yet who have questions arising or whom we have heard from? Well, please unmute. Diana, you need to unmute.
Yeah. So in answer to the question, what is our new story? I mused in our small group about the story of cooperation as I viewed it. And I thought the analogy that I drew was that of Dr. Henry, our British Columbia public health officer, who is great success in getting British Columbians to follow the public health guidelines and work to bend our curve. And she has done this through calm, clear communication, and her admonition, her encouragement to all of us. Every time she speaks, she ends by saying, be kind, be calm, and be safe. But the be kind is something that is very, very important to her. And the result of all of that is that British Columbia has done very well in terms of managing and dealing with the pandemic. We've never had the surge way up. We've had some spikes, but we've been able to, so far anyway, manage it. And everybody speaks about this person and the way that she presents herself, the way that she presents the issues, the way she's totally transparent, the way she doesn't blame, the way she doesn't dominate, and her encouragement always to be safe and be calm and be kind. So I think that model for me, that really holds. So I would say in terms of our new story, that question Guy asked us, our new story should well include a huge dollop of, if not be guided by, the theme of cooperation.
Beautiful. So we are at 2 o'clock. I think you don't need to leave. You just perhaps turn off your screen, stop the video, mute yourself, enjoy a 10-minute break, and we will start up again promptly at 10 past with our next section, A New Paradigm, the Economics of Kindness.
And we're on schedule.
We're on schedule.
All right,
Stretch
everybody, enjoy your break. Yeah, stretch break, whatever you like.
I think I'm going to unmute for those of you who are staying here. I think we could engage in just foolish banter for 10 minutes or so. I'm particularly good at
Careless persiflage?
that. Foolish banter is what I'm all about.
This could be dangerous, you know. This is what leads to wars.
Maybe just to find out who we are a little bit more. I'm seeing on my screen Deb and Stan and Sandy. Sandy, that's a lovely background that you have.
Yes, painted it myself. No.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. That's banter.
Is it a quilt or something?
No, I think it's a Monet, a detail of a Monet.
Ah, okay. You can see my shambles.
I'm in Elk Grove, California, if anybody wants to know.
Pardon?
I'm in Elk Grove, California, if anyone wants to know.
Holy mackerel.
Is that in the way of a fire? Elk Grove is where?
Not right now. No, we had bad air for a while, but no, we're near Sacramento.
Oh yeah.
I recommended a couple of books in the chat if people are looking for some great reads. Read through that and grab those books from your library. You'll like them.
I hope that Guy has a list at the end of the books that he has cited.
Yes.
Because he speaks so quickly, not been able to write them down.
We can ask him to give us a reading list, and I can circulate that to the people that registered.
Great, thank you very much, Bob.
Well, I'd like to be able to see all his slides at my own convenience too at some point.
Yeah.
I believe this is all being recorded, and I think that I can also send the link so that anybody can go back and watch any part of the session. I believe that's how the recording thing works, but we are recording. Lillian, how are things in Maple Ridge? You're muted.
I don't even see her on my screen.
Oh, Lillian, I'm trying to unmute you.
She's not on that. She's not in the group.
She's on a different page.
Yeah.
I see.
So I don't think we're all seeing
Yeah.
everyone.
You push the little blue arrow to the right of your screen and you'll see the second page.
The blue arrow, oh, the blue arrow, there it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll look for Lillian
Oh, there's
again.
there's three screens.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm usually on a different page.
You know,
Amber, where are you from?
I was in Victoria and I'm temporarily living in Comox Valley.
Oh.
Yeah, and I used to stuff envelopes with Guy a few years.
A worthy trade.
Yes.
I was so glad that Diane brought up Dr. Bonnie.
Yeah.
Because I think we've just been inordinately fortunate in having her as a chief leader, if not the leader, in this whole pandemic issue. And it has struck me that the leaders are so very important. And I heard through some others that yesterday the mayor of Surrey announced on CBC that good nutrition will protect you from this virus.
Can't hurt.
And the first thing that prompted me was, what about all of the people who are disadvantaged? We've got homelessness and all the rest of that in our community. What kind of a slap in the face was that to them? And we are wasting anywhere from 130 to $200 million on trying to get a new police force and not doing social services, etc.
Barbara Van Sickle, where are you from?
I'm from Vernon.
Vernon, oh
And,
great. We seem to have a wonderful dispersion of people for this session.
Well, Sandy, do you know about our Dr. Henry?
What?
Do you know about our Dr. Henry?
No.
Public health officer that Diane was talking about earlier?
No.
She's been absolutely marvelous insofar as providing information as well as support and encouragement to us in British Columbia with the pandemic.
Yeah. British Columbia at the moment is sort of in there with Taiwan and New Zealand and so on for having a low rate, despite the fact that we were one of the first areas to be affected. I'm just, Guy, what I'm doing is just kind of checking to see who all showed up for this. Bonnie Gabel, can you hear me? Where are you coming in from?
You'll have to
Hi, I have unmuted myself now. I'm in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver. I'm actually in the same building as Jill is located.
Oh yeah.
Downtown Vancouver, yeah. So Jill is the one who sent me the invitation. Thank you, Jill. I don't know, what was your question?
Oh, just trying to get to know the people who this is a record-breaking session. I think our previous record was 40 or 30 people.
Yeah, you have 39 this time.
Yeah.
According
which is half of who registered. So it'll be interesting to see how many people had problems signing in. But that seems to be normal for these kinds of sessions, is that more people register than actually show up.
So Bob, while we got a minute, I'm just going to share a 30-second clip of Bonnie Henry for those who've not heard her.
Oh, great. That'd be wonderful.
Well, they are recording. Thank you for keep a safe distance from others and protect our communities. What you do matters. You're helping to slow the spread of COVID-19. Please continue to help protect our loved ones, our elders, and our healthcare workers. And for children and youth, remember, this is not forever. This is just for now. Let's all be kind, be calm, and stay safe. Thank you for doing your part.
I'm nominating her for sainthood.
Can I just add that she says it's not forever, but it should
For
be,
now.
because be kind, you know, be calm, be safe. That yes, let's hope it goes on forever. And we need more mentors like her to emphasize this kindness. We need this to be educated, you know, not so much competition, but hey, look out for the underdog and don't be a bystander.
I'd also like to say, well,
you muted yourself, Diana.
okay, all right. I'd also like to say that I give a real big shout out to our Premier, John Horgan, who recognized that her message was really, really good and really, really clear. And he has, unlike some other premiers, has just given over the podium to her every day to do the reporting and do the encouraging. And then he comes up behind to support that when there's a really big need. So he sees that ethic of cooperation, I think. So you know how I voted in the provincial election.
I liked his message. Do what she says.
Time to roll.
You know, I've had some difficulty.
We're at 2:10 now. Shall we pick up again?
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody but the hosts.
All righty ho.
Whoop. Hold it.
Yeah, go.
Okay, Guy, you're on.
Okay, I'm not muted anymore. Good. So we're now moving into a session on a new paradigm on the economics of kindness. Paradigm is the larger set of assumptions that underlie the theory of something. It's not normally stated. So in Newtonian's paradigm of gravity, it was taken for granted that space and time were absolute. When Einstein came along and brought in relativity, a new paradigm was brought in, as a whole new framework of thinking. So all economics taught around the world in every university is neoclassical economics. It's conventional, and this is the model it follows. It's all about a very limited sense of money flowing between, you know, the market factors between households and businesses, and it's just everyone is assumed to be a rational agent. Everyone is assumed to be single-mindedly selfish and purely rational, and that we're always making decisions about the most singular economic gain we can get for the marginal utility of our decisions. If we do this, the market is assumed to be in equilibrium and everything will work normally. Our savings are the same as our investments, and the free market looks after everything. Therefore, we should not have government intervention because that breaks the so-called laws of economics. And this set of thinking was developed really in the 1890s by economists who wanted to have the same status as the physical scientists and the chemists and the biologists. They wanted to turn economics into a science, and to do that, they had to distort humanity and assume that we all act like an atom, always in the same way, being rational, super rational, and super selfish. And they then were able to express that in pure mathematics. So you cannot get anywhere in economics these days unless you have mathematics and understand this stuff. So the fundamental assumptions they now work with is that economics is a science. The nature does not matter. The energy does not matter. The human agency doesn't matter. The purpose doesn't matter because the only purpose is make more money, have economic growth. The power itself doesn't matter. So there's no distinction between the economic behavior of a slave owner and of a market gardener. The money creation doesn't matter. The reality that money is created by the banks and by the central banks for their chosen purposes, out of nothing. The social economy doesn't matter. All the relationships we have without money, and communities don't matter. Wow. And you wonder why we're in a mess, because this is taught in every university, and there's evidence that as students go through economics courses, they become more selfish in their decisions. 4 years in, they are thinking more selfishly and more narrowly than when they started. They do not learn about economic history. They do not study anthropology. They do not study environmental stuff or anything else apart from this narrow creed. So this new theological domination based on mathematics. So for a new paradigm, the opening assumption is economics is not a science, it's a branch of anthropology, because it's about human behavior. That nature matters, like duh. That energy matters, and if we know the energy of fossil fuels is different from the energy of renewables, and how can we handle a certain lifestyle on renewable energy and not fossil fuels? These things matter. That human agency and our relationships matter. That purpose matters, and we choose what our purpose is through democracy. That power matters, and the imbalance of power and the inequality that flows from that, and the land ownership and all that stuff. That money creation matters, and understanding how money is created. That the social economy matters, communities matter, work matters, the market economy matters, and the public economy matters. So I've managed to put this into a framework, and Kate Rayworth separately has put hers in a different framework. She's come up with a framework called Donut Economics in her book on 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. She says today's economy is divisive and degenerative by default. Tomorrow's economy must be distributive and regenerative by design. And her model of the donut, round the outside there, you've got the 9 resilience boundaries of the planet, which we should never exceed. None of our activities should cause excess action in those 9 realms that are in the sort of browny orangey color. And in the middle is the social foundations that none of our economies should impede and limit individuals' access to water, food, health, education, and stuff like that. So the pale green, the safe and this safe and just space for humanity is what she thinks we need to lead for. And the whole of the city of Amsterdam has now embraced her model as their means of recovering from COVID. And she's now set up a whole laboratory called the Donut Economy Action Lab, where people around the world can use the frameworks of shared thinking to support each other in using donut economics to rebuild their economies. My framework is different. It says we don't live in one simple economy. We live in 5 intertwined economies. The first, obviously, is nature's economy. It's the core and essence of everything we are, and it's ludicrous to exclude it. It's the foundation of everything. Within nature's economy, we have the social economy. The relationships, every kind of relationship between people that does not actually use money for exchange. All non-monetary relationships of trade and exchange happen here. The social economy is the origin of trust. It's the foundation of stability. It's also the origin of money and the origin of central bank gift money. So let me just explain that a second. So if you're in a circle in a tribe and you're looking around the fire and you think, oh, well, you know, Antonia did a really good haircut for me the other day. I owe her something. And Deb gave me some real good foot massage, so I owe her something. I'm carrying an invisible debt to Deb and Antonia. If I put a unit of money on that, that is what money is. It's an expression of reciprocal exchange. In our same tribe, if someone is really suffering, and we'll all chip in and help out without expectation of return, that's the equivalent of central bank gift money, or central bank, when central bank can create money out of nothing to, well, what we should be doing is to tackle the climate emergency. They're using it to support the stock market and the wealthy through quantitative easing, but that's another story. The market economy is basically inherently cooperative. It's an essential expression of personal agency, but it must have steady regulation, which we'll come to. Then we have the public economy, which is an essential expression of shared purpose. We have the collective care of the commons, including nature, public ownership of natural monopolies, redistribution of wealth to reduce inequality, and regulations against corruption and greed. Now, in addition to that, there's a 5th economy, and it is the war economy. And I don't mean war in the sense of missiles and bombs. I mean war in the sense of bullying aggression, coming out of that ancient hunter-gatherer versus sort of primate impulse. So the war economy tries to assault nature's economy. It'll steal what it can from the rainforests, from the oceans, whatever it can. It will assault the market economy, trying to distort the rules, trying to get away with whatever it can, try to cheat, steal, collude, whatever, and form monopolies as well. It'll assault the public economy, claiming that public economy is always inefficient, that everything should be done by the private sector. It will also assault the social economy, for sort of trying to privatize, the caring that we do out of love and care, sort of turning it into an economic thing. So we need a constant struggle to overcome the war economy if we want a cooperative economy. So by excluding the realities of power and the war economy, conventional neoclassical economics has washed economics clean of slavery, empire building, conquest, colonialism, exploitation, land grabbing, price rigging, trade wars, inequality, democratic interference, captured agency, regulatory manipulation, racial and sexist prejudice, corruption, mortgage redlining, Wall Street soft bedlining, vulture finance, asset stripping, tax evasion, and all the other sorry evidence of dominating power seeking. There's a good rap in there, I think. So there's a struggle all the time between the cooperators who want to live with kindness and the dominators who want status and power. The Britain's Common Cause Foundation did a survey of people's values about 10 years ago. It asked, do you prefer to live by cooperative caring values or by values of status and importance? And it found that 74% of people preferred to live by values of cooperation and caring, but 26% wanted to live, but so their status, their importance was more important. They wanted status. And that same relationship shows up in some of the game theory that's done with people who cheat. It also shows up when you get people who do get into positions of power. Some of them, the power goes to their head and they will abuse and do all sorts of bad things. So that struggle, and I believe this struggle will be here in 100,000 years' time. I believe it's got genetic origins. We have genes and our behavioral background that goes right back to the primates and back to our hunter-gatherer roots. So to build in economics of kindness, in each of these realms has to be looked at and transformed. We've got to transform business, banking, investments, and I've done work on all of these things. I've only got time to cover a few of them this morning. So what I'm not covering is business. And basically the secret there is that every business needs to adopt a social purpose charter. It will not be good enough for it to happen voluntarily. It has to happen by law. And business law is changing all the time, but my game is a 10-year transition. Within 10 years, every business must adopt a social purpose charter, which they're legally obliged to meet the needs of the community, of their workers, of all their stakeholders, and not just of their shareholders. And there's other principles that apply to banking, stuff like that. So we've saved 2 minutes there. We can have a break for discussion about that particular, and I sort of added social enterprise in the middle there. I forgot to mention that. Social enterprises really mixes the market economy, social and public altogether. So back into discussion groups about what you think about that particular new paradigm for economics.
Do you have questions for us, Guy, or just generally musing about how that grabs us?
I didn't have a prepared question.
Do you have a particular question, or we're just discussing your model?
Just discussing the model. Does it fit with your experience? Does it seem to make sense? And if anyone is an economist and has done economist training, be good to hear from them.
Right.
And the time, there were some complaints that there wasn't quite enough time left.
Well, actually, we're 4 minutes ahead of schedule, so we can actually have 9 minutes.
All right. 9 minutes.
The very central one, the very last one, Guy, that you said that was in the center of the social market and public economies. Social something you said. That one.
Social enterprise. That's when people start up a business. It's not quite a cooperative, but it runs as a business with social purpose goals, and often in partnership with public sector things, but it's part of a market economy.
Yeah.
So,
all right,
Bob, we're scheduled to come back at 2:35.
All right, 2:35. You'll get a 30-second warning. Paul, good to meet you. I'm gonna see if I can unmute you. There.
Oh, there you go.
Paul, we've had for those of you who are looking on, we've been having an interesting discussion about the Newfoundland lobster conflict.
Yeah, it's been a real interesting discussion, that's for sure. It's especially out here. This has the opportunity of like COVID. COVID has pointed out so many different things to us that we absolutely have to change. And this East Coast, the racism here and the East Coast fishery is another thing that not only is it going to change what happens out here in the East Coast, but this is about Indigenous law, about our treaties, and that's going to be applicable all over this country. So anyway, hi, my name's Paul, and it's great to see all of you.
From Cape Breton, as I believe, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Good, good. I think we don't need to deal with it here, but I think that dispute illustrates some of those 5 components that Guy Dauncy was talking about as the new, or the way in which economies work, conflicting economies. Ronnie, you need to unmute yourself. There
It
you go.
certainly highlights the war economy part he had in his model.
Would anybody be interested in a very quick summary of what's happening in Nova Scotia between the Mi'kmaq and the non-Indigenous commercial lobster fishermen?
I've been reading about it. Even south of your borders, there's a lot of press on it.
It's actually not a particularly new situation, because we had the similar situation in the Fraser River with the Stolo Nation salmon fishing. The government of Canada has recognized that our First Nations people have rights that pre-exist the colonialization process, that are defined by treaty, and that to some extent the First Nations can be considered sovereign, and they have the right to fish for lobster or salmon or whatever outside of the regulation of the country of Canada. Although I think that's still an area of negotiation. But the Mi'kmaq essentially have said, we haven't been able to settle something in 20 years, so we are going to assert our traditional rights to do what we want in the situation. And that provoked a fairly racist and unhelpful counter reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah, I think that one of the other, there's a number of different players in this, but one is a fellow named Risley, who is he's a billionaire who owns Clearwater, which is like a clearinghouse, for the fishing industry out here. And if he gets fined $30,000 for an infraction, that's like $3 for me, So, but you see, they're again, it's very similar to what we talk about in terms of the donut economy. And when we look at the donut economy or the circular economy, Indigenous people have been following those kinds of ideas for thousands of years. Right? You look at your absolute necessities in the middle of the donut, right? And gradually, as you work out, then all of the other, you might call them primary, secondary, and tertiary needs, right?
Yep.
So anyway, I'm really thrilled that you, as a group of elders, are paying so close attention to this issue, and that you're willing to share ideas and ask questions and commit to dialogue about it, because it's really an important issue. I think racism in Canada is just as significant as racism anywhere else in the world. And,
Paul, could I ask you a question?
absolutely.
Yeah, Paul, how are young people out in Cape Breton and so on, how are they responding to this?
Well, you have, probably about 3 camps. You have those who are really in tune with, the situation, the cultural and the social situation, and
The woke ones.
yeah, exactly. You're going to have the younger people whose parents and grandparents have been fishing, for a long time, and it's all a lot of racism is based on nothing but rumor and things passed down from one generation to another, and it's been ill feelings. So you're going to have that group that takes the side of the non-indigenous fishers. Then you're going to have the young people on the reserve or that are participating in the indigenous fishery, that they obviously feel like we've been going for centuries, having our government uh, basically practice systemic racism. And I think that the time has come where a lot of people are saying enough is enough. We can't live side by side anymore with this in between us. So, and then you have the youth that are interested in something else. They've got an education, they want to make a living, so they're doing what they can to make ends meet. So, it's like was said earlier, hey, this could sound like a good rap tune. I wouldn't be the one singing it, but
can I just ask a quick question? I forgot to keep track. What time, does anybody know what time we started this discussion? I'm supposed to be keeping track of the time, so.
It was supposed to be 9 minutes, but I can't remember when we started.
Yeah. I can check. But
go to your schedule.
Oh, right. Yes. Is that?
I think it would be 9 minutes now, judging from the exchange that Ray and I have been having.
Well, I can go back and ask Guy what time it is. Did anybody else have any other questions about the new economic order?
how do we get the extremely wealthy, of our world to start chipping in and influencing the rest of things in a good way?
Tax them.
Okay. A friend of mine had, I think, a pretty good idea. Hire a bunch of very attractive looking women and have them date the very wealthy men that are in control of all this. I thought that was a pretty sexist idea, but no.
I'm going to switch out for a second and just to check the time.
I just want to say it's so nice to see the faces of people who I have been, reading, comments about on, the Suzuki Elders, site and stuff like that. So from East Coast to West Coast, hey, it's awesome. Are any of you economists?
To follow up on that question that was posed just before he left for a moment, I think that it would take huge political will to actually and I think it should be a priority, because every country is losing in terms of the social opportunities as a result of the. So but I think it would take political will to do that at a national level.
Yeah. And Sharon, I agree with you. I think this whole business of the corporate, the corporatization of everything has not led us down a good path. You know.
Well, in your environment there where you are, who are the kinds of people that have some vision of where to go and kind of work out of it? Or can you characterize them in any way?
Yeah, there's quite a number of different groups, that we communicate on a pretty regular basis, as not only the Suzuki Elders, but with the Council of Canadians and the Extinction Rebellion. There's a group that's based out of Pugwash, which is called the Thinkers Lodge, and it's was formed many years ago to deal with issues of national and regional importance, and so it's called the Center for Local Prosperity. And right now, a fellow by the name of Robert Cervelli is the executive director. And what they've done over the past number of years is they've held weekend gatherings with experts and people from all over the Atlantic region as well as the northeastern U.S. to discuss exactly what we're discussing here. Things like food security, the old economics about agriculture, all the primary needs, and also about the economic situation. Is like here in the Atlantic, it's quite different economically than it is in other parts of Canada. So we've had I would say a challenging economic situation because of an awful lot of our younger people moving to other places in Canada for employment and providing a living. So anyway, it's we have groups like what's called Next Gen, which is Next Generation group, and they're young people with relatively young, 40 and under. They get together once or twice a year as well, and they look at the same kinds of things that we're looking at right now. They're talking about how do we populate Cape Breton Island or the Atlantic region in a better way to bring about foods. Like we have an awful lot of people that are growing their own food, and almost all of it is organic. So we've seen more and more young people doing that. So
we're all back together, correct?
I think so. I'm impressed that our participants have stayed pretty steady. People are not flying away. They didn't join, so some people may have had trouble, but I knew some people are going to have to leave early, but I'm pleased that most people are there. Guy, do you want to? I don't see any hands up. Do people have questions? You can put your hand up or just speak out.
Yeah, we have on schedule. We have 3 minutes for public Q&A now, if people want to, although we can jump right into the next session.
Well, I want to know how we stop the 25% that want to dominate us.
Only by persistent resistance. I believe that there's a genetic factor in there that goes right back to the ancestry with the primates, and it'll still be there in 100,000 years. It's the same way that we stop bullies at school. In the schooling I grew up with, bullying was never spoken about. None of the staff addressed, even one of my teachers was bullied. It wasn't. Now when we're conscious of bullying and you can build a culture in a school, someone needs some muting, by the way. We can build a culture in a school.
Please mute.
Yeah, we can build a culture in school that makes people conscious of what bullying is, and we can talk about it. The same with husbands bullying their wives. That was, for years, women put up with that and didn't speak up. But the women's movements are now giving women the power to be able to speak up to it. So all of that domination is a version of bullying. And we have the majority. 3/4 of people do not want to live by those values.
Right.
But we've been intimidated by 5,000 years of dominating hegemonic theory and thinking to believe that it's all natural and it's the way it is. And it's enshrined in land ownership patterns and status and stuff like that. So, but the majority want to live by different values.
Yes, but the dominant people don't care what the majority want.
They have to be overthrown.
They
They have to be
Satya,
overthrown.
Satya, I think I saw that Satya had a hand up. Can you unmute yourself, please? You're still muted, Satya.
We didn't hear you.
Satya can't find the unmute
Oh.
button. You can unmute her. Bob, can you unmute Satya?
When we have, are you got there?
There you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your question, Satya.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that I went to Cuba in 1962. I was 21 and Fidel Castro was 36. The whole economy, the whole system was built on that they wanted equality and compassion. Now, we were talking about tribalism and people who are dominant and not dominant. And I'm trying to remember in the society I lived in 17 years, in the medical world, I was a physician, and in all the rest of the world, if I could think of who was dominant or not dominant. And Fidel definitely wasn't even in the dominant sense. He was trying to run this crazy society that in his idea should be compassionate, because Raul and those their kids were part together with my kids. We were all normal. I think the dominant people all went to Miami and they're all voting for Trump now.
Well, clearly in response, there are people in Cuba who still get put in prison and silenced for their thinking.
All right, now that is an issue that was brought up at the beginning. There were a number of socialist countries that got in by different reasons, and the CIA and the Americans in the 60s eliminated them all. And so the idea with Cuba, they were going to be a much more strict with people who were actively acting against the society and planning things against society. They were going to be much stricter than what happened in Chile and places like that. So that was a decision that to keep them there, they had to be tougher. Now, if there was a more tough or less tough or what you could do, well, that's history. I'll go back next year and see what happened.
Okay, that's a huge topic. Very interesting one. Okay. We're at time now. Guy, do you want to carry on with
let's roll
your
ahead.
Next section?
So let's go to, so the next session is the evolution of a cooperative economy. And almost all of this will be new to almost all of you. And 15 minutes may not be enough here, so I may be chewing into time the other direction. So what I'm looking at here is that if you picture most of our economy as being based on dominating institutions, businesses operating out of profit maximization, banks operating the same way, there's very little, if the institutions of the economy that are dominating are red and those that are cooperative are green, there's very little on the landscape if you go back 500 years. And then over the last period of time, there's been a progress of cooperative institutions on the landscape. And where I believe we need to go is that virtually all our institutions become cooperative. So this is a historical journey now. So since ancient times, communities have practiced mutual aid to help each other out. This is on an island off the Chilean coast, but in Canada, whether it's Habitat for Humanity or just volunteering on a community, there are many things when we all get together to do work in common. And that still happens certainly in every indigenous society, but in many societies that have not lost their indigenous roots as well. The Cajun Navy, whenever there's a hurricane down in Louisiana, they're out there spontaneously, unpaid, helping people. The cooperative instinct kicks right back in an emergency. People, we saw it at the beginning of COVID, then weakened, maybe come back again now. People are really there to help each other, especially in a crisis. The trade itself is inherently cooperative. You could never have had the Silk Road with people traveling all the way from Venice to China without immense trust and cooperation along the road. And traders knew that if you cheated on them, you were going to be boycotted and you never would trade with that person again. The whole process of trading was cooperative. And that means that the entire market itself is highly cooperative. This is an image from the Tang dynasty in China, 7th century BC, just saying that the wealth and variety of trade and the massive number of stuff that crosses the world every day today, you know, it's all done in a cooperative basis in which in the Arab world, a handshake is sufficient to that seal of cooperation. Today we have 20,000 lawyers to do it, but it's still fundamentally cooperative. In the Middle Ages, the guilds, Middle Age Europe now, if you're a cooper or a weaver or a dyer, and there is no innovation, so the only way to get ahead is to cheat or lower your standards or pay your workers less. So the guilds were established to freeze this quality standards and keep the standards of crafts high, governed by the guild themselves in a cooperative way. And the guilds basically were all economics in Europe, you know, in the crafts realm outside the land was run by guilds before the Enlightenment came. The Enlightenment when it brought innovation, suddenly the guilds became an impediment to change because you weren't allowed to do an innovation, you couldn't get ahead. So they had to go, and Adam Smith's was, you know, attack on the guilds opened the way to a much more innovative, dynamic economy. In Italy in the 12th century, because they had a lucky period when they were not being dominated by kings and rulers from Northern Europe or Southern Italy was taken over by Normans who re-established feudalism with a vengeance, but Northern Italy was left free. And the city-states of Verona, Genoa, Milan, Venice, Bologna, Florence, all established communes in which certainly the traders, it was not the aristocracy, it was the traders and merchants and the middle class who set up communes of self-governance with elected bodies of people who did the ruling. And part of their work was to stop the aristocrats from exploiting people. And I'm sure the working class weren't really involved, but they kept that going right through till the Black Death, which caused so much havoc that the aristocrats were constantly fighting each other with their own battles to prove how powerful they were, and they then took over again. But Italy had a very strong 300-year tradition of cooperation from, say, the 10th century through till the 13th century. So yeah, people formed communes, guilds, and neighborhood associations. They wrote legal codes to limit the violence of the landed aristocrats. They swear oaths to provide paternal assistance. The penalties for violations was boycott and social ostracism, exactly as it was in the hunter-gatherer days. That's how you behave with people who are misbehaving. Then we come to a jump to the 18th century and New England and in Pennsylvania, where Benjamin Franklin was involved, and the Pennsylvanians didn't have any money. They were depending on British currency based on the gold standard. So they printed money. They created their own money where the collateral was the land that you owned, and they used it to really build strong economies. And they had a flourishing economy based on publicly created money. They issued the money at zero interest. And they used it to pay for public works, to build roads and bridges, and generally improve the economy, employing people who would otherwise be impoverished and begging on the roadside. Landowners could borrow scrip at up to twice the value of their land, which was their collateral. When Benjamin Franklin went back to London and was talking about this in the coffee shops, the folks from the Bank of England heard about this and instantly banned the scrip issued in Pennsylvania, which some people consider was one of the causes of the American Revolution because it caused more poverty and stress. Jumping ahead to the same century, up in Scotland, mathematics was just advancing in statistical theory to be able to do actuarial mathematics, and the ministers in the Presbyterian Church were distressed that if they died, their widows had no money to live on. So they invented insurance by using complicated mathematical stuff to set up the Scottish Widows Fund so their widows would always have pay. It's entirely a cooperative thing. You put in your money, you take out. And Scottish Widows now is a sort of multi-billion-dollar affair. but the essence of insurance is fundamentally cooperative. Public banking was invented in Germany in the early 19th century. In 1801, the local government in Göttingen established Germany's first public savings bank. By 1903, Germany had almost 3,000 Sparkassen, and Germany became a nation of savers, a tradition they've never lost even through financial disasters and 2 world wars. Today, Germany's 430 Sparkassen and 8 Landesbanken and public savings banks own 40% of Germany's banking assets, and they provide loan finance to Germany's famous Mittelstand network of small companies. So now we've got the public sector operating a bank, and public bank can create money at 0 interest if it needs to. It does not have to meet the needs of any private shareholders who own and control that bank. So we're not a 200-year tradition or 220-year tradition of public banking. Workers' cooperatives were first established in the 1800s, and they came of age with the Rochdale pioneers in 1848, who, having failed on a previous cooperative, they wrote a code of ethics and behavior which sort of everyone would follow. The rules brought success, and 250 cooperative retail societies were formed across Britain, with similar societies in Austria, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Iceland, Spain, Japan, Brazil, Mexico, America. In 1895, the International Cooperative Alliance formed with delegates from all over the world. Today, its members are active in 3 million cooperatives, employing 280 million people, generate $2.1 trillion in turnover. And people have learned that a fundamental cooperative is a very solid way of working. I'll come to that in a bit more detail shortly in Mondragon. So in 1864, German Friedrich Wilhelm Raiffeisen also started cooperative banking. He was living in a village area, and the peasants had just been freed from feudalism, but to get out of feudalism, they had to buy their land off the landlords, and they had money from loan sharks, and they were paying 30% interest, so they were all going rapidly bankrupt. So he set up the first rural credit union with voluntary membership, joint unlimited liability. That phrase, joint unlimited liability. So they're all in it, all for one, one for all. Shared monitoring of the loans, unpaid management by volunteers, all profit added to annual reserves, and membership strictly local. You have to be able to see the church steeple if you're a member. Their collateral was not property, but trust between neighbors and fellow farmers, one for all for one. And the Raiffeisen banking system now is enormous all across Germany. It's a huge, big thing. By the late 19th century, Raiffeisen banks are forming all across Europe. In Quebec, Alphonse Desjardins established the first Caisse Populaire in 1900. By 1914, there were 100 of them. Today, Desjardins Group has 7 million members and $248 billion in assets. In America at this period, the progressive era was absolute because of the terrible conditions in the slums of the cities. There was a massive explosion of mutual aid and cooperation with the forming of all these clubs, Shriners, the Red Cross, the Rotary Club, the Boy Scouts, Optimists, and 1,000 others. There were black cooperatives among the newly freed slaves. There was the Grangers. It was the movement of agricultural people against aristocratic landowners and the banks, the Knights of Labor, the Greenback Labor Party, the suffragettes, and a huge environmental awakening with things like the National Audubon, well, a small beginning environmental awakening, the National Audubon Society. People began to be outraged about women, killing all the birds for feathers in their hats and stuff like that. So it was a massive awakening in response to the appalling conditions of the robber barons, the plutocrats controlling everything in America. Let me look at Finland, for instance. At that period, Finland was under Russian rule. But Hannes and Hedvig Gebhard, they traveled into Europe to learn about cooperation in Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, and they helped form a group called Pellervo, which is a Finnish national organization to promote free cooperation in different agricultural sectors and spread the cooperative idea. So in February 1899, Tsar Nicholas shocked every Finn by proposing to turn Finland into an extension of the Russian Empire. They responded with a surge of patriotism. In October, they gathered in the university and formed the Pellervo Society. Then they introduced cooperative legislation, formed a central cooperative fund. By 1905, they formed central associations for cooperative dairies, retail societies, sawmills, farm machinery. Within 10 years, they got 1,800 cooperatives operating. An astonishing change that's gone totally unremarked in all the books of economic history. And what they learned was that you have to have the association of cooperatives for each area to support the cooperatives as they're going along, and the equivalent of a central bank for those clusters of cooperatives, so you can manage the cycles of debt and the surplus or stuff like that. But Finland now has the world's most cooperative economy with 5,500 cooperatives. 84% of all adult Finns are members of at least one co-op, 70% work for a co-op, generating 12% of the income of Finland's 500 largest companies. By GDP, 20% of Finland's entire economy is cooperative. The next closest is Italy at 12%, places like Canada and America and Britain at 3%. Finnish agricultural cooperatives have a market share of 97% in milk, 80% in milk, in meat. Consumer cooperatives supply half of people's daily goods. Then we moved to North Dakota, where there was an uprising forming a sort of populist party, and they managed to establish the Bank of North Dakota under public ownership for the people of North Dakota. It survived every assault on it. In 2014, the Wall Street Journal said it was more profitable than Goldman Sachs, had a better credit rating than JP Morgan Chase, provides North Dakota with a strong financial center, supporting 6 times more locally owned community banks and credit unions per person than the rest of America. It's a lot more detail there, but it's the only public bank in America. Scandinavia had a similar, the early 20th century, Scandinavians were fleeing Scandinavia to come to America. There was so much poverty. George Lakey wrote this book on Viking economics. His wife is Norwegian, so he dove right into it. He says that Scandinavia's prosperous social democracy was achieved through struggle. There was constant workers' struggle against the aristocrats and the landowners. This is just one measure of striking workers. And then when the combined democracy gave workers the vote, and because the Scandinavian socialists did not go down the Marxist path and did not call for revolution, they said, let's go down the social democratic path. They were able to bring in regulations that didn't freak out the landowners and didn't cause a fascist response. In Norway, they did, and there was a Quisling government under fascists in the 1930s, and then Hitler moved in. And so Scandinavia's success today is based on phenomenal amount of workers' struggle in the 1920s and 1930s. They have a law in their culture, it's called the law of Jante in Scandinavia, which says, and you'll be shocked by this, you're not to think you're anything special. Not as good as we are, not to think you're as good as we are, not to think you're smarter, not to think you're better, not to think you know more, not to think you're more important, not to think you're good, not to laugh at us, not to think anyone cares about you, and you can't teach us anything. You might think that's a total put down. Actually, it's hunter-gatherer code. Don't get too big for your boots. Whereas the whole culture in America is like, how big can your boots be? Especially if you're in Texas, the bigger the boots, the better. This is the hunter-gatherer code to suppress self-importance, but look what it's done in Scandinavia. They have the happiest, most stable, most successful economies on the planet, using that kind of code, which is hunter-gatherer ethics. In the 1930s, in the Depression in Virgil, they brought in their own currency because no one had any money whatsoever. So the mayor of Virgil, they had 500 unemployed people, 200 families completely penniless, no welfare, nothing, people willing to work, but no money. So the mayor used the 40,000 Austrian shillings he had as a deposit for local currency, which loses 1% of its value every month, requiring the purchase of a stamp to retain its value. This caused people to spend their earnings quickly, providing work for others. When the mayor's projects were done, they built new houses, a ski jumper bridge. 6 neighboring villages copied the system. The Prime Minister of Paris came over, called it the miracle of Virgil. Each local shilling created 13 times more work than a regular shilling without causing inflation. So if this had been allowed to continue, there might have been no fascism in Austria and Germany. But Central Bank of Austria freaked out and suppressed it. They wanted control over the money supply. In Switzerland, by contrast, at exactly the same time, a bunch of businesses got together and said, look, we've got a lot of collateral between us. We can set our own currency up called the Wir, which is German for we, and it grew from 16 businesses in 34 to 62,000 businesses today with 3 billion Swiss francs in assets, annual interest-free loans worth 6.5 billion francs. When Switzerland's economy booms, the Wir is quiet. When confidence sags, businesses turn to the Wir. It's a cooperative, self-regulating Keynesian system that keeps businesses rolling and sustains aggregate demand in difficult times. And the Switzerland central bank did not suppress it, which is why it's still going. In Nova Scotia in the 1930s, with similar unemployment, there was the Antigonish movement that was started by one of the universities there. And the 2 Catholic bishops got involved, 2 priests got involved, Thomas Cody and another one, I forgot the name. And they started doing trainings for people in how to start cooperatives. They formed study groups. So in this one small fishing village of Judique on Cape Breton Island, there were 12 cooperative study groups in 1932. That's the equivalent of 5,000 study groups in Vancouver. The study groups led them to build a lobster factory and pay off its cost in 2 years. Then they built another, then they opened a credit union, then a coffee shop, co-op shop. They told Cody's staff that we're much richer than we were a decade ago, economically and spiritually. We've gained much confidence in ourselves through directing and managing our own affairs. And hang on, going the wrong way here. Press the wrong button. By 1938, there were 1,100 study groups in Nova Scotia with 10,000 members. They formed 142 credit unions, 39 cooperative stores, 17 cooperative lobster factories, 11 cooperative fish plants, and 11 other co-ops. By the study group method to learn how to do this and pull yourself up by your own bootstraps as a community. Then we switch to Italy, where the cooperative tradition continues. And after fascism, during fascism, corporations they killed the leaders, they crushed them, they sent them into exile. But after the defeat of Mussolini, it came back with a vengeance. So this area of Italy, with a population of the same as BC, is among the wealthiest in Europe. 32% self-employed, 76% work in small businesses. Italy's fourth largest exporter, 400,000 enterprises, 7,500 co-ops. So that same tradition of reciprocity, regional economic mutual support. So the co-ops have a 0.4% levy on all sales, which is put back to support other co-ops. Regional credit systems linking into local enterprises, the lowest unemployment, highest citizen satisfaction altogether. What you've got here is ethical cooperation extending to all of private enterprise and the cooperatives together, leading to fantastic success. They had a communist regional government all the way from after the war until today. It's changed its name several times, but paradoxically, the communist government led the strongest cooperative impulse without putting anyone in prison or doing anything remotely Marxist. Then we turn to Mondragon, which founded at the same period in northern Spain, where they now have a network of 100 cooperative businesses and a philosophy of participation and solidarity. Mondragon is just close to the town that was smashed by Guernica, which was smashed by the Nazis in the Civil War, right? So the Father Jose Maria Arizmendiarreta was asking questions: how do we transform our economy without going down the capitalist route and without going down the communist route? He said, the world is not here to contemplate, but to transform. We're called to risk our initiative, responsibility, and creative capacity, starting with the most modest creative working organism, the enterprise. In this manner, we can unleash a new attitude, transform the economy, and generate a new socio-economic order congruent with human dignity and the demands of human communities. He started off by setting up a workers' trades college, technical college, and then some of them went on to form one business. They then grew to have 100,000 people working in 100 cooperatives. In the 2008 financial crisis, one of their businesses was really challenged because all incomes fell by 10%. Zero redundancies. They negotiated a joint reduction of 5% income reduction. Managers took the biggest cut. And new workers who lost their jobs found a job somewhere else. They were outrageously successful. There's more on Mondragon to say, really, but they operate in the capitalist market economy. Their wage differential between the highest and lowest worker is no more than 8 to 1, where it's like 800 to 1 in North America. And they don't have unemployment. They run their own university, their own welfare system, their own job generation cooperatives when they're dreaming up new ideas all the time. They're full of innovation. They're an incredibly good example of cooperation dominating a whole economy for everyone's benefit. Sorry, wrong button again, this way. The Yak Bank was formed in Sweden in 1974, based on zero interest loans. So the 39,000 members own the bank. They pay in monthly. They can draw out a loan with zero interest anytime they want. And they now have 90 million krona, like 13 million Canadian dollars in their accounts. They get no interest on their savings, and they pay in and borrow, and they get savings points for what they cash in. So it shows that you can do zero interest lending without that constant burden of having to find the 5% money to pay the interest. Then we have Mohammed Yunus in Bangladesh, who was walking home to work. He's an economist, through a village, and he saw this impoverished woman. He lent her $30 and she repaid it really quickly. As a result of that, he started the Grameen Bank. By that, now he has 9 million borrowers, 97% of whom are low-income women. They got almost 2,500 branches, providing services in 81,000 villages. That's 97% of all the villages in Bangladesh. Been so successful that the private banks have copied it and sort of increased the interest rates, giving microcredit a bad name. Their collateral is nothing. They don't own anything. Their collateral is their trust of themselves in circles of 5. hugely successful. In 10 years, people are being lifted from total poverty to stability. Then we look at the Triodos Bank, was formed at the same time by sort of people who said we need a new way of banking. They've now got 715,000 customers, 69,000 business accounts, branches all over Europe, 15 billion euros under management. They only lend for projects that are regenerative and making a difference in the world. Women are almost 40% of their management team. Then we have benefit corporations founded by a team of people. There are now 3,000 benefit corporations. So these three people in 2005, they just finished a business. They were going to start a new business. The world doesn't need a new business. We need a new way of doing business, a new kind of business. And importantly, a legal framework that makes the values of sustainability, community benefit as central as the need to earn money. By 2020, there are 3,500 certified B corporations in 150 different industries in 64 countries, proving that a business can succeed in a competitive market without having to sacrifice nature, the climate, or common decency. However, at the speed of increase of B corporations, if they got 2,000 new businesses a year, it would take, no, I think if they got 1,000 new businesses a year, it would take 2,000 years until every business in the world was a B corporation. So it's not fast enough to get the change. We need to have a legal required regulatory change that every business must become a benefit corporation equivalent or a social purpose business. They have a corporate purpose to create a material positive impact on society and environment. They've redefined fiduciary trust to require consideration of non-financial interests when making decisions, and they report annually on their overall social and environmental performance using recognized, trustworthy third-party standards. And these are all benefit corporations in Vancouver. This is probably 3 years old. There's probably twice as many by now. They're all registered benefit corporations. And then a similar thing is happening without anyone talking to each other in Austria, where Christian Felber, who's actually a juggler and a musician professionally, saw the need for a new economy. So he started the economy for the common good and the Gemeinwohl economy to persuade businesses and banks to embrace common good as their purpose, aligning economy with ethical values. By 2020, he's inspired 2,000 pioneering enterprises and 62 politicians to support his basic idea. And he's got 400 companies to adopt a common good balance sheet and a whole movement of people to be born. And those two things, the B corporations and economy for the common good, have no communication between each other. It's a spontaneous uprising of need to transform the way we do business. So in a dominating economy, we have primates, conquest, ownership, colonialism, slavery, empire, capitalism, and neoliberalism. In a cooperative economy, hunter-gatherers, achievement societies, mutual aid, the commons, the market, trade, social finance, insurance, cooperatives, community banks, community economics, well-being economics, donut economics. Like, what's not to like about this thing? Here's an example. It's two similar retail stores, one owned by Walmart, pays $8 an hour, no benefits, no pension. Similar store, employee owned, pays its clerks $11 to $17 an hour. Over 400 employees have $1 million in savings, and their prices are lower than Walmart. That's what you achieve in the economy when you have employee and worker ownership. And this shows the benefits of a cooperative economy compared to a regular. It is more successful. You've got, with cooperatives, lower rates of employee turnover, fewer business closures, greatly reduced CEO to worker pay ratio, employee shareholder, higher productivity, 250% more retirement assets. Democratic workplaces are more productive, more innovative, reduce inequality, companies are more ecologically sustainable, higher life satisfaction. Cooperative banks are more resilient, fewer losses during downturns. They outperform the investor-owned banks. Purpose-based businesses outperform the stock market. And 70% of Canadian consumers want companies to show how their products and services will make the world a better place. There's your basic values of carrying a corporation. 60% of millennials want to work for companies with a purpose. Highly engaged employees give you higher and better employee retention, higher customer satisfaction, and 400% more revenue growth. And when companies benefit all stakeholders, over 15 years, they outperform the S&P 500 massively. So it's not just that the values are better with the cooperative economy, they're better in financial terms. Like, what's not to like here? So Paul Hawken also expressed this, that the 1960s to 2020s have been an enormous movement of self-help, non-profits, especially environmental movements. And he was speaking at the Pioneers in 29, he said, "We are part of a movement that is greater, broader, and deeper than we know ourselves. It flies onto the radar of the media. It is non-violent and grassroots. It has no central ideology. A male vertebrate is not in charge. This unnamed movement is the most diverse movement the world has ever seen. There's no orthodoxy. It is global, classless, unquenchable, tireless. It has many roots, but primarily its origins are indigenous culture, the environment, and social justice. It is Pachamama, the earth, talking back, waking up. It is marked by kinship and community and symbiosis. There is no center, no one spokesperson. This is the first time on earth that a powerful non-ideological movement has arisen. It is humanity's immune response to resist and heal political disease, economic infection, and ecological corruption caused by ideologies. It's about possibilities and solutions. Humankind knows what to do." 5-minute break for discussion.
Well, okay, we need to do a bit of a reset.
So I'm 10 minutes over now, aren't I?
15.
Okay.
We've used up our break time for the 3 o'clock. So let's
right,
just
I
have
did
just a quick thing.
We can do it.
Do people a 5-minute break and carry on, and then we'll have time for the last sections with breakouts, or do we want to do a breakout now? I'll let you decide, Guy. We're
well-
at the end of our break for 3 o'clock.
Oh, I see. I've screwed up on. I've taken the 10 minutes. Yeah. In fact, we're due to start the next session right now. I've taken 20 minutes more.
Yeah. So what if we do a 5-minute? What if we do a 10-minute break? 5 minutes in our breakout room. 5 minutes break, and we'll be back at 3:20.
Okay.
And you'll pick up. And you'll pick up with your last 2 sections.
Yeah,
That
it's
work?
a bit easier the last 2. That was the most
So we're
complex. That one.
in our groups
let's go
for
to
5
this
minutes, and then take a break. And Bob
Okay.
will call us back at 3:20.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating and encouraging.
Okay, can I just check, what are people's understandings at the moment? We're going to talk for 5 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. And then be back in the main room at 3:20?
That's right.
Yep. All right, if I can start just asking Paul, it struck me from my reading of, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but the situation in Nova Scotia with the Mi'kmaq. I know on the West Coast, Indigenous fishers do really well, and they have essentially cooperatives, where each village or river shed has a fishing cooperative that they work through. It occurred to me that might be the way in which the Indigenous fisheries in Nova Scotia could operate, or maybe they have in the past.
Yeah, that's a good question. We used to have a number of locally operated fishing processing plants here throughout the Atlantic region, but that was geared to the commercial fish industry, and so it's been a really touch and go scenario, with Indigenous fishers that way, because number one, they didn't harvest anywhere near as much as the commercial fishers did. A lot of the local fish plants, in different communities have been either bought out or shut down. Clearwater, tends to focus on centralizing their initiatives, and so that's what's been happening. again, it's about corporatization. So the Mi'kmaq, I'm not sure exactly what's happening right now because like I have a number of friends of mine who, you know, are Mi'kmaq elders and people that I stay in contact with. But one of the things that they've decided to do is to negotiate directly with the federal government first and to work out some kind of arrangement. And it's going to have to be an economic one as well as a, you know, one of licensing and permission, or, you know, and the Mi'kmaq people are just saying, we have, you know, treaty rights and we're going to exercise those rights. So they have just announced too that like non-Indigenous fishers have said, well, we'd like to be in on the discussion. Well, the Mi'kmaq turned around and said, I'm sorry, you know, we're not talking to you yet. We're talking nation to nation with the federal government. And once we work out those details, maybe after that, we'll have a chance to discuss things. And so I think that I like the smile on your face because I think that that's one of the things that our Indigenous people all across Canada need to do. You know, I think that, you know, they're tired of being the poorest people, you know, in Canada. You know, they have so many of them don't even have clean water, which is in this day and age, I think that that's just incomprehensible. So anyway, it's, you know, again, I love this discussion about the donut economy because there are so many things that we need to change economically. I'm just thrilled that Guy goes through this. I mean, you need to, I had to put on my high-speed hearing equipment to follow along with him, you know.
Yes. He does seem to press a lot in.
Which is fine. It's just that, you know, when you're not used to somebody that, you know, fires off 12-cylinder words one after the other, you know, it's good for the hearing ability. So anyway, I hope that your question, it's, you know, there's, go ahead.
What I think may be different is, and I may have this partly wrong, but on the West Coast, the First Nation, the various 60 or so First Nations that we have here, many of them are quite wealthy. They you know, they control large areas of land. Their you know, their fishing cooperatives are highly profitable, and you know, there isn't, in some cases, yes, but in many cases, there's, you know, there's not a observable problem. They're thriving, healthy cultures. And I'm just wondering if that cooperative economic structure, you know, village structure is partly to account for that. I know one of the interesting things in the Nova Scotia thing is the Supreme Court said that a moderate livelihood is a village or community right, not an individual right. And I know that confuses things sometimes. Anybody else want to jump in here on the, you can unmute yourselves, and or do we need to take the 5-minute break, or can we biological break?
I think one of the differences between West Coast and East Coast is in BC. The tribes in BC have never signed treaties of any significance, and so they own the land.
Yep.
Right. So
they really are sovereign.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a huge difference, I think, between the two, because in all of the other parts of Canada, I mean, the Inuit, you know, signed one, you know, an agreement rather than a treaty back in the early days of the Beaufort Sea development. That was probably back in the 70s. And that was just, that was before they signed, Nunavut into realization in 1999. So, so the different tribes in the rest of Canada, are operating slightly differently than those in BC. And one of the things, like in BC, you've got an awful lot of resources, that we are really having an issue here with forestry as well, in that like the Irvings of the world and the corporatization, the paper mills, etc., have been literally just going through raping the forests. And we've been, have the Healthy Forest Coalition as an example, the Ecology Action Center, our David Suzuki organization, etc. We're trying to have the brakes slammed on, so that we can look at what we're doing with our forests in a sustainable way. Like it breaks our heart, out here on the East Coast when we read about, your old growth forests even being, licenses being allowed to cut in there. I don't understand why trees that are that old are not sacred and protected.
Heritage sites, yes.
Exactly. I mean, if I were 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years old, I would like to be a protected site.
Ronnie, are there cooperative organizations in your area?
I'm in Toronto, and there are many young people who are starting things. Say, they might be members of the CSI. Anyway, looking at small social ventures, right? But I don't think the co-op model is much thought of. And I've heard people make comments about MEC, that MEC's problem was that the co-op was
Mountain Equipment Co-op.
Mountain Equipment Co-op, that they were using an old model of what a co-op meant, and so they were veering too close to a regular corporation, and then they are now becoming one. So I think there's a gap, at least in my area, of people thinking, other than for some people belong to cooperative financial institutions, but other than that, I don't hear much. My family left Sweden at that time of famine that Guy was talking about earlier, when some of those co-ops were being created. And it seems like one issue is, how do you make sure that the benefits are spread widely enough?
Can I pop in here, Bob? Yeah. Well, it's time. It's past 20 past. So
okay.
It seems like you might want to call people back. We were going to start again at 20 past.
Yep. Okay.
So
Here we go.
my group took a break, and we'll let Guy see what he does with the last two sections. It's been pretty good, pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah,
pretty packed.
Well,
good.
We've got 30 seconds to close down. I have to admit that when I saw that the Swedish list of things there, my thought was Garrison Keillor's description of Lake Wobegon, and just don't the old Lutherans who don't think you're so smart because you're not. I hadn't thought of that as a particularly Swedish thing, but having come from the Midwest, I know that there is a certain don't think you're so smart because you're not.
So is Guy back yet?
I'm back here, ready to roll.
Oh, good. All
okay,
righty.
Guy, we'll let you manage the 35 minutes we've got left in any way you think is best.
Okay, so we're into the two final bits called Transforming Community, then a New Ecological Civilization, and we're 10 minutes plus behind schedule. So transforming community and the transition to a new ecological civilization. We really need to get a grip on the shift from personal wealth to community wealth and understand what community wealth means. I think it's a very powerful term. If you imagine community A, where someone is living on a very low welfare income, but there are very few community services or initiatives, very easy to be pretty depressed and defeated. But now take that same community, and so in that community, you're going to have high levels of loneliness, homelessness, poverty, debt, unsupported mental illness, stress, and fear. Take that same community and add affordable housing, add great public transport, add affordable childcare, add safe bike lanes, add urban food initiatives, great schools, work sharing, a sharing economy, lots of green space. That's from the heart of the city of Seoul in South Korea. Solar energy, great urban spaces where people can gather. That is the High Line in New York. So there's lots of chances to mingle and chatter and meet each other. Community currencies, basic income or something equivalent, free college education, social purpose businesses, banks and cooperatives that are meeting the needs of the local community, social enterprises and non-profits, and a cooperative local economy. So in the same economy, you've got phenomenal community wealth, and the same person on a low income is gonna be able to get by a lot easier. It's gonna be cheaper housing, cheaper transport, cheaper childcare, cheaper food. So the same money will go a lot further, and the social wealth will be much greater. And that is the foundation of the social dimension of a new ecological civilization, I believe. So this form of a community coming together to celebrate, this is from Portland, you know, neighborhoods that otherwise nobody speaks to each other, finding a way by doing projects together to meet each other and know each other becomes all important. So in Dagenham and Barking in London, there's an initiative there to bring people together in that same way. That shows where it is outside London. And they've launched a 5-year project to launch 250 new projects, 100 new businesses, and engage 25,000 people as participants. Knowing that when you get a certain threshold of participation, you start bumping into each other and you get to know each other and you're building that social capital and the people of community wealth. And so their future, whatever what street you're on, you've got these initiatives happening and people will be part of 3, 4, or 5 initiatives and they'll cross-connect with other neighbors and get to know each other, and you'll rebuild that sense of community that's been lacking. In the town of Frome, it's written Frome, it's pronounced Froome in Somerset. There's been a thing happening called the Compassion Project for the last 10 years. And this book has just been published like a week ago. The Case for Hope and Human Kindness from the Town That Beat Loneliness. And basically, out of a population of 28,000, they've trained 1,000 people to be community connectors. They've published a directory and a website of all of the community resources, from chess clubs to hockey clubs to sort of bereavement societies to whatever. And the GPs and all the health people have access to it. And so they can refer people into a whole network of other activities. They have talking cafes where anyone can talk to anyone, where you can meet up without any purpose. And the community connectors who have a 2-hour training are present in those cafes and clubs, and they know the skills of how to connect people who are lonely or in need into the wider community resource. Between 2013 and 2018, their emergency visits fell by 15%. While Somerset emergency visits as a whole rose by 30%, like a 45% net reduction compared to normal in emergency visits, because a lot of the emergency visits are people who are isolated and lonely and just they had bigger issues. It wasn't just rheumatism, they just had something else going on tied to loneliness. And 4% of the population has been trained community connectors with just a 2-hour training workshop and coming out to the health department, and their town is so recovered and vital and lively because of all this. In addition, they have a thing called flat pack democracy, whereas the council, going back 10 years, was so slow and lazy. The group got together who were not partisan, not tied to any political party, and they won every single seat. And they took over the local council. They immediately started doing things, starting initiatives. They started the cafe, people talking to each other. They got bike lanes going. They got electric vehicle things. and they've revitalized democracy. They've actually, it's a book you can buy called Flatback Democracy, Power Tools for Reclaiming Local Politics, about how to take over your local community if your democracy is sleepy and sludgy and going nowhere. And so that book, and so literally today, this thing has been published called Think Big, Act Small, Elinor Ostrom's Radical Vision for Community Power. She is a prize-winning economist. It's called the Nobel Prize, but actually it's the Bank of Sweden Economics Prize, who said that actually the tragedy of the commons doesn't exist. When communities get together, they can negotiate a cooperative arrangement to manage the commons, and especially at the small scale. So if you go to newlocal.org.uk in Britain, you get lots of examples of small scale democracy happening and all this stuff. I believe we need a government program of cooperative public renewal, CPR, to accelerate training, leadership, and rediscovered agency in struggling communities. So you put in the resources to help agencies train community connectors, train community leaders, start visioning for the future, and reclaim the power instead of the sense of disempowerment and weakness that's the fundamental problem in communities that are collapsing. We can be whatever we have the courage to see. So then, I was quite quick on that. We've got time for a 5-minute discussion break on these ideas about community. So let's do that right now. Can you put us back in our groups? Do
you want to do it in groups or?
Yep. Let's go to groups. Let's go to the groups.
All right, there we go. All right, now I now understand who we are. We are the unassigned.
Okay.
Oh.
Did anybody get the name of the book about Froome? I tried to write it down and he was gone before I got it.
Yeah, Flat Pack Democracy.
No, the earlier one.
Oh, the Compassion Project by Dr.
The Compassion Project, that's the one.
Dr. Julian Abel and somebody.
Okay.
He goes so fast.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, Ray, you're back. Unmute yourself.
I have to leave shortly. I facilitate meditation sessions here in Toronto. So.
Oh, really? Oh, neat.
Yeah. So I'll be doing that in about 5 minutes, I think.
I find this he's going fast, but a lot of what he's talking about seems quite relevant to the current situation, and I'm sort of wondering if a lot of people are talking about what are the positive things that will come out of the pandemic, and maybe it is something along the lines of a more cooperative economy.
Can I ask, is the International Charter for Compassion, is that a big thing in Canada?
It was.
A number of communities here are making use of it.
Who wasn't there a woman who won a grant?
That's right. With for TED.
What was her name?
She wrote Karen Armstrong.
Karen Armstrong. Yes, it was in Vancouver. There was a Karen Armstrong. Vancouver had a compassionate city year, but we're no longer compassionate. So
okay, yeah, we had that where I live, and all of this stuff that he was talking about fits beautifully within that framework. My city has a charter for compassion that calls for meeting human needs in a way that meets environmental constraints. Okay, and all the things he's talking about really fit very nicely within it for anybody that has that framework.
Which city are you in again?
Elk Grove. It's a suburb of Sacramento.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, Vancouver was did the Charter for Compassion, but I can't point to any current example that survived the year.
Survived that, yeah. Okay.
So. Changing a whole economic system is, I think, easier said than done.
I think there's a framework that makes it a little easier. That I've noticed that internationally, a lot of people are talking about moving from an economics focus to a human development focus. And so if you're focusing on or human well-being, they call it in some places, but if your purpose is to promote human well-being, and then of course environmental, health with it, then that kind of gets them out of just talking about economics over there. They can come back and talk about it as a tool. But I've noticed a lot of conversation is being put in terms of changing from wealth-based, a purpose to a human development or a human well-being purpose.
This strikes me as something that may be quite close to what the Green Party is proposing. We just had an election in BC where the Socialist Party and the Green Party beat the Liberal Party, and there was no Conservative Party whatsoever. And
I want to move there.
Well, as I like to tell my conservative friends, having a socialist government is no guarantee of that there's not a lot of nonsense. For example, the NDP is pushing the liquid natural gas development in the province, and that's an understandable thing. But it was better when they were the minority government and the Green Party had three people to hold them to task. But it seems to me that one of the things he's suggesting is that you can form cooperatives like Mountain Equipment Co-op or Van City Credit Union and so on, and those can have an influence that's sort of punch above their weight.
That mountain equipment just collapsed.
Well, they didn't collapse. They sold out to a private.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah. And that may have been just due to bad business decisions that they made.
Yeah.
They overexpanded just prior to a pandemic. Paul, I was interested in that history about Nova Scotia, that cooperative movement. Was that in the 1930s or
yeah,
the 60s? Or?
Yeah, it was started back in the 30s. And the other fellow that was involved with that was a fellow by the name of Tompkins. Tompkins and Cody, they worked together. And actually, there's an awful lot of cooperatives here on Cape Breton Island. There's, it's here in Shetty Camp, they actually own the funeral home too.
Cooperative funeral home. That sounds like a good. Well, wait a second. There's in Vancouver. There's the I forget the exact name of it, but it's like the Funeral Society, which is a nonprofit. You can sign up to, because obviously funerals are tend to be a very expensive thing. But this is essentially a cooperative association, which says they'll bury you for without a profit.
We have one of those organizations here too, actually about 30 minutes away, and it's called the Sunshine Cooperative.
Oh yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's so I have my choice. I can be buried in a cardboard box or a small pine box that's made from local wood. Or
I think I got my eye on the time here. I think I have to do the 30-second warning here. So,
alrighty. I love the idea of cooperatives. I think they make so much sense.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. People should be returning at this point. Did we get the timing of that right?
I'd like to see cooperatives taught, information about cooperatives taught in schools and colleges. I think that would help a lot.
Is Guy back yet?
I'm back.
You are, good. Did I get the timing right on that?
We're 4 minutes behind now. We caught up a bit. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. So let's roll right back in. for the final session here, which is the new ecological civilization. And we're just actually, 3 minutes late. So this, I believe, is the new story that we need to move towards. This is what we need to dream of and think of and everything like that. Something to think about. Earth is 4.6 billion years old. If we scale that to 46 years, we've been here for 4 hours. Our industrial revolution began a minute ago, and in that time, we've destroyed more than half of the world's forests. This is not sustainable. Yep. Throughout existence, having a positive intention of a future outcome has been a precondition for success. So what we hold in our minds becomes really important. We're constantly visualizing that we're going in this direction. I didn't invent the term. Others have, been active using the same language. So it's not anything I claim, but I think it's, over the last 2 years, the most powerful single, 3-word expression that captures what we're going to that I've come across. Imagine our human story. We've been primates, we've been hunter-gatherers, we're agriculturalists, industrialists. It's very easy to assume that our next stage is being, ecological, in our getting renewed respect for the earth. And the earth is telling us, if you don't do this, you're screwed. Frankly, it's mandatory. So some visions, in many ways, in parts of the world, we're already living the kind of beauty of landscape and of towns. This already expresses the values of a new ecological civilization. It's already happening around the world. The simplicity of this, the houses without cars, that's a co-housing project in Seattle. The shared neighborhood gatherings and feasts, the food being grown locally, the design of houses in clusters. This is in Shropshire in England. And so the car's off to one side, so you walk around and immediately you're going to connect with your neighbors. You're not first in a car when you meet them, you're a person, you're meeting them. This is a new Regenesis village in Denmark, where it's not just walking around, but it's also growing all your own food and generating all your own energy. This is another vision of the inside of those Regenesis villages in Denmark, which they now started building. Growing food becomes a really important part of all this, so we're not dependent on these massive food chains and stuff. Ecological restoration, finding all the land that's degraded and bringing nature back to it. That's just an 18-year period. Nature is incredibly strong if we let her have her head. You need local nonprofits to lead that and give the organization. Greening the downtowns like they've done. This was a dirty old creek in Seoul that became a 4-lane highway, double stacked. And they took the highway out and brought back the creek. And people just love it. Creative architecture. Mixing nature and walking and all sorts of just creativity, even more crazy creative architecture. That's a remodeling of Paris. And then super crazy creative architecture. Let the visions blossom, right? And then just the simplicity of being back with nature. It was fossil fuels that launched the industrial age and the modern age. It was fossil fuels that made science, engineering, solar voltaics, and electric vehicles possible. We couldn't have got here without the fossil fuels. It's not that they were wrong. More solar energy reaches Earth in an hour than humans use in a year. For 300,000 years, we used that solar energy through firewood. Then we discovered how to use it for fossil fuels for 300 years. We can use it for 1 billion years as pure solar energy. In fact, 2 billion years before Earth turns into a black dwarf or red giant, whichever it is. With every passing year, solar technology gets better and cheaper. It is already the cheapest form of energy on the world, 2 cents a kilowatt hour for utility scale solar. Cheaper than coal, cheaper than gas, cheaper than nuclear, cheaper than everything. Leave the fossil fuels in the ground. End all coal mining by 2025, all extraction of natural gas by 2040, all extraction of oil by 2040. Speed up this transition. There are others who say we've got to do all this by 2030. It's doable if you take a wartime response to the whole thing. It's farewell and thank you to the fossil fuel workers. And it's paid transition for them, no loss of income as they retrain as home retrofit workers, wind turbine workers, whatever it is. But it's real respect, no sense of disrespect or negativity towards the fossil fuel workers. And it's welcome the solar age, which means wind energy and renewables and everything. Climate's a double challenge. We've got to not only get to 100% renewable energy and zero climate pollution, we've also got to draw down all the excess carbon from the atmosphere. There's 300 gigatons of surplus carbon we've got to re-biosequestrate into our forests, soils, peatlands, bogs, oceans. And nobody talks about that challenge very much. Being carbon neutral is a false trade-off between the two. You've got to do both. Citizen mobilization is essential. In Britain during World War II, it actually would not have been possible without the millions who volunteered to join the Red Cross, the YMCA, Women's Voluntary Service, St. John's Ambulance Brigade, Oxfam Home Guard, which by June 1940 had 1.5 million volunteers. Seth Klein's new book, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency, is essential reading for anyone involved in the climate crisis. So I'm arguing, he doesn't put this in the book, that every city of 1 million people needs 20,000 climate leaders. That's 2% of the population, that's all, will volunteer to eliminate climate pollution from their household heat and transportation by 2022, become a climate bot captain, help their neighbors do the same, and mobilize for greater climate pressure on governments. It's the missing piece between what governments can do and what one householder can do. And nobody talks about this missing piece. On food, I can't go into it now, but I've done a whole presentation, which is on my website, on what we take to build a truly resilient local food system. It's a 45-minute talk on its own. If you want a shortcut on Netflix right now, these two movies, Biggest Little Farm on Netflix and Kiss the Ground, both fabulously good movies, really good inspirational movies. I see the thumbs going up there, right? Ecological restoration everywhere we are, from our city streets and parking lots to the wilderness areas. Massive work needed for ecological restoration. Ecologically sustainable finance, to understand how banks create money, how public banks can issue zero interest loans, how central banks can issue credit guidance, which basically forbids private banks from lending money for fossil fuel expansion projects. That's how they operate in China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan from the 19th. So that's how the Eastern tigers became so successful, by using credit guidance. And central banks can create public gift money for emergencies. If we need $20 billion a year to retrofit our homes, central banks can underwrite loans to enable public banks to issue that at zero interest. If it's things, if we need money that has got no interest on it at all, that central banks can just create that, but only in emergency, not for general expenditures. Otherwise you get inflation. And global trade, just touching on it briefly, because it's such an enormous thing we don't often talk about, but it's because we're normally, you cannot control it as one country. We need a global movement here. Christian Felber, who I introduced earlier, has written the book on this, came out this year, was published in Austria 2 years ago. And he's basically putting it like this, that under the current free trade zones, you've got reduced trade tariffs, open competition, race to the regulatory bottom, and trade tribunals to protect capital, not nature, countries, or workers. He's saying we need ethical trade zones with trade tariffs based on compliance with human rights, labor rights, climate protection, a race to the regulatory top, and trade tribunals to protect nature, countries, and workers, as well as capital. So this would be the trade regulatory culture and infrastructure for a new ecological civilization. I've had no time for all these other topics. So there's a lot of stuff I haven't covered at all, whether it's housing, social care, monetary policy, whatever. But basically back to that contrast between personal wealth and community wealth, and quite frankly, that word enough. We need to stop over-consuming and move to sort of other forms of fulfillment and stop collecting stuff, all of which has got a massive carbon, climate, ecological footprint. And I had to came across this today. I've always wondered what was on the other side of that wall. That is our ecological civilization waiting for us to claim it. For Progress in British Columbia, I helped write this document for coming out of COVID. It's packed full of policies and ideas and initiatives for British Columbia. And this is a modest proposal for coming out of Slovid. The benefits of COVID: take stock, slow down, think, use your imagination. See how quick and easy reducing emissions can be to clean the air in the cities. Put an end to predatory tourism, recognize our vital public services. Show how working remotely is feasible, like we're doing right now. Great opportunity to share care and work and duties. Show the power of community on a massive scale. Be conscious of our empathic and collective potential to preserve life, and see what a degrowth society would look like, even if only for a while. We've got to dream about this and then plan it and do it, put it into practice on the ground. That's why I call myself a practical utopian. In the heart of our being, we've got to make this a very, very central dream of where we're going as a planet, and not just retreat into individual isolation. This is my novel, Journey to the Future, that paints this stuff in 2032 in Vancouver, as if all this stuff has happened. This is a website I put together on Pinterest, which has got 500 images of a new ecological future, all visual pictures. That's my website again. And we have 5 minutes, 10 minutes left for 5-minute break for discussion, and we've caught up, then 5-minute Q&A. So, back into
I'm seeing a number of requests for the reading list or the references.
So, Bob, you have
the recording. The
We have the
recording, is
recording,
that going to
yes.
be available, and the slides? I don't know what Guy has in mind, but
So
there are
there's two
people
things
have
here,
been
Bob.
wondering that.
You have an email list for everyone who signed up.
Yes.
I can put together a reading list and a reference list, which to send it to you, and then you can send it to everyone, including a cut and paste of that quote from Paul Hawken that someone gave a request for. It's actually not a written quote. It's a YouTube quote that I wrote down word by word because I thought it was so good.
Great. Yeah. If you email that to me, I can email it out to the
give me a day
registrants, all 80 of them.
Right. But the slides and the recording will be a couple of days, I think, because you've got to edit it and do that stuff to take the breaks out and things like that.
So is the plan for the elders is to put the recording on the website? Is that right, Stan Hurst?
Yes, that is the plan.
Hang on, sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Ask me the question again.
The plan is to put the recording of today's session on our website, the SuzukiElders.org website. Is that correct?
3 hours long. That's bigger than our website.
It's only 2 hours without the discussion groups.
Oh, I don't know. Well, okay. Well, the possibilities are immense. We'll figure something out.
But it'll become a YouTube video. Then you just put the link to the YouTube video. It's simple as that.
Sure. What about the possibility of the slideshow, the slides?
Yeah.
Well, they'll be incorporated into the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Oh, that's wonderful, Guy.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. I'm wondering, given this 9.5 minutes, if we stay in the large group and to wrap up together. That way people can speak up who haven't. Are people okay with that? Are you okay with that, Guy? I'm seeing some nods.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to people in my group for our discussions. We had a good time.
Yeah, it was really good. And thanks to Bob, our technical support guy, for doing all that. So we have 6-7 minutes and then, questions, comments, raise your hand on the side if you can as a participant. Otherwise, raise your hand physically and we'll try to catch you.
Sandy?
Yes, I recommended a couple of books in the chat. One of them is Wilding, about a piece of land in England that was returned to a wild state, and it's a beautifully written book, which points out many of the things that we've talked about today. And it's nice because you get the sense for the fight that they had to do against the powers that be in Britain that are standing up for nature, but they still had issues with wilding, and it wasn't understood in exactly the same way by everybody. And the other book is a different topic. It's called Being Mortal. I thought that since several of us are older.
So Sandy, I can add, I've read Wilding. It's a wonderful book about a farm in Sussex that was traditional and failing financially, and they did an incredible conversion of ecological restoration.
Right.
And in my men's book club, I've read Being Mortal, which is a real full of insights for all of us who are getting more gray hair by the day.
Right. Yeah.
I see Patricia has a hand up.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank
Bob.
you. Thank you, Bob. I'd just like to say, Guy, this has been truly wonderful having a chance to hear your perspectives. And I just wondered, in that you are so knowledgeable about this, if you had to pick 3 things that you would like us to particularly take away from your session today, what would those be?
Well, the first, I haven't got 3 yet. The first is, which I haven't shared yet. When people say, do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about the way things are going? I say, look, if you're watching your favorite sports teams play in the crowd, you're optimistic or pessimistic because you have no control. That they, but if you're a player on the ice or on the soccer field and you're 4-1 down in the final period, you're either determined or you're defeated. And if you're defeated, the coach is going to pull you because you're no use. So if you're a player, the only game in town is to be determined, and issues of optimism and pessimism just don't come into it, right? And we all
Amen.
need to become players and be determined and not just onlookers from the outside making cynical or whatever comments. The second is that for myself, this new understanding going back through anthropology about the real division that matters between domination and cooperation, I get affirmation of that in the news every single day. And I think realizing that how much our political regime is stuck in left versus right, when the left wing is accused of being, not good for business, and the right is being accused of not good on government, it's just stupid. Like, of course you need business and of course you need government. So that analysis brings in a much wider frame of thinking. Among other things, one of the pieces that the male hunter-gatherers were pretty universally, prejudiced against the females. And it's almost like when we got back to the realm of domination, they were given a private agreement by the dominators that, in exchange for us dominating you at work and on the land, you can privately dominate your women. And then both parents dominated the children. So you've got this cascade of domination going, often tied to brutality and terrible parenting. Right? So escaping from it all and being very conscious in our behavior. You can have a non-profit taken over by a dominator and the whole thing goes sideways. Or a church group or anything. It's a very solid framework. And the third one is simply that it's really important to hang on to that, have a positive vision of where we're going. Because if you have no vision of where you're going, you're drifting and you can't inspire anyone. The thing I'm told all the time is that, I find you so inspiring, so positive, I love listening to you. But all I'm doing is bringing examples from around the world, putting them in a single frame. Everything I'm talking about is being done somewhere by other people. And I brought this up in our little group, every initiative that I did in that long historical thing was started by an individual, or maybe sometimes a couple, who started, and then they get people together, they form a group, and if the group is run well, you enjoy being together, you love your time together, and you make a difference, and you're having fun. So what I call the fifth law of sustainability is if it's not fun, it's not sustainable.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I actually suspect, you say that everything I'm talking about is being done by someone else. I suspect that there's a lot being done by everyone who's here on this platter of people in front of me and this big screen. Otherwise, we wouldn't actually be here today.
Right.
But I know that I'm feeling extraordinarily, well, maybe not extraordinarily reinvigorated, but reinvigorated, going through a difficult time here in my my small cooperative strata corporation. After hearing and listening to today, I have a new line on how I'm going to work on a particular problem that's requiring more cooperation rather than domination. So that alone is going to take me into the evening, where I have to write up some minutes, and I'm going to do an entirely different language than I was doing this morning. So
every group needs to have a discussion, not just around Robert's rules of order, but about domination versus cooperation and what it means in terms of listening, and be all aware that you're not pointing fingers at someone, but every one of us has the potential to become a dominator in certain circumstances. And we just need to be conscious of it and learn when we're doing it, whether it's casual mansplaining with me putting down a woman or whatever it is. We're all learning on this one. Now we've gone very silent.
You will need to unmute yourself if you want to.
Well, I'll just add in that it's not true that hunter-gatherers that were male-dominated, women were equally important and respected.
Doesn't it vary, Antonia? I thought there's quite a lot of tribes, and you look at them, so, I mean, a lot of
tragedy as a result of the dominance of males in the settler society.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
But their basic structure, it was and in many cases still is extremely equal.
Yeah.
And right now, Frida Hewson fighting against Coastal GasLink coming through the Unistoten camp is a perfect example.
Yeah. Thanks for correcting me on that. Yeah.
Anybody else? We have just a couple more minutes. What a wonderful presentation. I'd like to thank the team that helped put this together, and Guy for your being willing to be our facilitator for our very first experimental Zoom salon. I would say it's remarkable success. And
Yeah.
attendance and the logistics, I'm just very, very thrilled and grateful.
Well, people should know that Bob and Jill put a lot of work in behind the scenes, getting to this place and able to make it successful.
Yeah.
And it was a terrific presentation, so dynamic, so alive, so much fun to follow and watch. And
thank you. I just need to find a publisher for my book, because I've interesting.
New Society.
Well, I've been rejected by New Society, but interesting thing is that each time I've been rejected, I've gone back and do new work on the book. Now, if I'd been accepted by a publisher, I'd be okay, gung ho, near to the finish, and I've had new insights.
Well, we have 40 people here. Let's all call New Society. And
each rejection has been a gift.
May I speak to that? May I speak to that? I found it frustrating that so much of what you were saying had to do with what life pre-COVID was. There's simply not the opportunity to do the social gathering and the social places and all the rest of it anymore in the way we used to.
that's right. And we are gathering together here on Zoom. I take your point, Deb, it's different, but we are resilient and creative, and we're responding to those challenges in sometimes very remarkable and rewarding ways. So let's hold that vision.
We are privileged. We've got the homes, we've got the technological gear and all the rest of it.
That's right. So we are the leaders.
Yeah, but almost everyone has a computer or a cell phone or a laptop of some kind, like almost everyone. And during the summer, our Ecological Society, we kept on meeting outside. It was in a spaced area. Now we're going back to Zoom, but we'll be back in the spring.
Yeah, we've done that too with the Green Team, being able to meet outside. So thank you all very, very much. I'm impressed the way we did our schedule and participation and technology and Guy's energy and information. So
thanks,
any
Jill.
closing remarks for anybody? Yep, was that Diana?
Yeah, me saying thank you to Jill. You're the one who pushed this through and continued an ongoing discussion with Guy. Will this work? Will that work? Will something else work? Made it work. So
yep.
Good for you.
Thank you for your leadership, Guy.
Thank you, everyone. It's appreciated.
Really good to see everybody else. Terrific seeing you all, hearing you.
And,
so
and for those of you who are not officially Suzuki Elders, we're so happy to share the space with you, and look us up on our website if you're interested in joining.
All right, so I think we'll end. People can leave. Does it make any sense for Bob, for you and me? Do we need any follow-up, or shall we just wrap up now and do that later?
I can hang on here for 2 or 3 more minutes.
Okay. All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Nice to see you, Cynthia.
Okay, thank you. See you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Wow, very cool. And Pat, you stayed on. That's great. I'm glad you were able to do that. You're muted. All right, so are there any logistical things that we need to talk about, or are we good? I think in terms of our presentation, it was stunning. I just am very impressed how well it all worked. In terms of follow-up, is there anything more helpful to do in person, or can it be all by email?
Well,
I don't have the overview there.
I will need to get the stuff from Guy that I can forward then on to the list of registrants. And
it'll be a day or so, because I got another priority. He's been queued up all week waiting to get this out of the way.
No problem. Now, I'm not sure about how one goes about editing the cloud recording of
You
this.
find someone under the age of 21.
Yes.
Honestly, if you put a call out in some younger circle, they will do it really easily, because you just got to edit it. There's a bit of software they use. I don't know how to do it, but I know they do it easily.
Yep.
Oh, terrific.
Well,
Yeah.
Someone's got a
it'd be nice.
grandchild. It's a sort of, I'm sure one of you's got someone who can do that for us, right? And then they could also put it on YouTube.
Sure.
And so in terms of copyright and information and keeping it together, Guy, what has been recorded and what you're going to share, what do we need to know or take?
Well, you best not
account
talk
about
about, you're best to not talk about copyright at all.
Good.
Because
I'm happy.
firstly, everything on YouTube is up for anyone to grab.
It's a cooperative. It's a cooperative society.
I just grabbed all those images.
Sure.
Okay, great. That suits my way of doing things.
Yeah,
Great.
make it common. Common. I forget the phrase for it now. I mean,
open space or something.
Open commons. Yeah, open license. Yeah.
Great, terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very, 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 very much.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye, all.
Be well.
I will
Good
shut
luck
us
with
down.
your-
I'm going to take my dog for a walk in the forest.
Yeah, I'm going to get out too. Thank you. I mean, good luck with your next project that you've had
Thanks.
on hold.
Okay,
And bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're out.